Egypt, land of pharaohs, pyramids and mysteries that have puzzled humanity for thousands of years. For centuries we thought we understood ancient Egypt. We had the stories, the timelines, the explanations. But what if we were wrong? How much do we really know about ancient Egypt? The answers might surprise you. The Narmer paradox. The most important artifact in Egyptian history sits quietly in a glass case at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. At first glance, the Narmer palette appears straightforward. A ceremonial stone slab showing a king wearing the crowns of both Upper and Lower Egypt, striking down enemies standing over decapitated bodies. For over a century, archaeologists have pointed to this 5000-year-old piece of carved slate as the smoking gun that proves how Egypt became unified. But what if the most famous story in Egyptian history is wrong? The traditional narrative sounds perfectly logical. Around 3100 BCE, a warrior king named Narmer swept down from Upper Egypt, conquered Lower Egypt in a brutal military campaign, unified the two lands, and founded the world's first nation-state. The palette, discovered at Hierakonpolis in 1898, was considered the perfect evidence. One side shows Narmer wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt, smiting a kneeling enemy. Flip it over, and he wears the red crown of Lower Egypt, reviewing rows of decapitated corpses. Case closed, Egypt unified in a single swift conquest. But modern archaeology tells a very different story, one that should make us question everything we thought we knew about ancient Egypt's birth. The problems begin with what we don't find. If Narmer truly conquered Lower Egypt in a devastating military campaign, where is the archaeological evidence? Excavations throughout the Nile Delta reveal no signs of widespread destruction around 3100 BCE. No burned cities, no mass graves, no sudden cultural changes that would indicate a violent takeover. Instead, archaeologists find gradual cultural blending that began centuries before Narmer was even born. Even more puzzling, pottery analysis shows that Nakhada culture from Upper Egypt had been slowly spreading northward for generations, peacefully absorbing local traditions rather than destroying them. Trade networks connected north and south long before any supposed conquest. The two regions were already becoming one Egypt through commerce and cultural exchange, not war. Then there's the question of the other kings. Recent discoveries show that rulers before Narmer, kings named Herihor, Ka and Scorpion, were already exercising authority over parts of both Upper and Lower Egypt. Serics bearing these names appear at sites throughout the country, suggesting the unification process was gradual and involved multiple rulers, not a single conquering hero. The Narmer palette itself presents contradictions when examined closely. The enemies being defeated don't represent all of Lower Egypt. They appear to come from specific regions, possibly just the western delta area around Buto. The hieroglyphs suggest localized conflicts, not a war of total unification. Some scholars now argue the palette depicts ritual ceremonies or specific battles within an already unifying Egypt, rather than the conquest of an entire kingdom. More troubling still, the red crown that Narmer wears, supposedly proving his conquest of Lower Egypt, was already being used by rulers centuries earlier. Pottery fragments from Nakhada show this crown being worn long before Narmer's time, undermining the idea that he was the first to claim authority over Lower Egypt. Archaeological evidence from other sites raises additional questions. At Tel el Farka in the Delta, inscriptions record the names of multiple rulers from Narmer's time, suggesting Egypt wasn't completely unified even during his reign. The royal necropolis at Abydos shows that subsidiary burials and administrative practices continued evolving for generations after Narmer, indicating the unification process continued long after his death. Perhaps most significantly, seal impressions from later dynasties list Narmer as the first king in an established royal sequence. But this could simply reflect how later Egyptians chose to remember their past, not historical reality. Ancient peoples often created founding myths that simplified complex historical processes into single dramatic moments. The evidence suggests that Egyptian unification was not a moment but a process, one that took centuries and involved economic integration, cultural blending, and gradual political consolidation. Narmer may have been an important figure in this process, perhaps the first king to effectively rule over most of Egypt, but he was neither the sole unifier nor the first to claim authority over both lands. What emerges from modern archaeology is a story far more complex than the traditional narrative. Instead of a single conquest, we see a gradual merger of two civilizations over many generations. Instead of one founding king, we see multiple rulers contributing to Egypt's eventual unity. Instead of violent subjugation, we see peaceful cultural integration punctuated by specific conflicts. The Narmer palette remains a masterpiece of ancient art and an important historical document. But it may be propaganda rather than journalism, a carefully crafted image designed to present Narmer as the definitive unifier of Egypt, regardless of the messier historical reality. Like many royal monuments, it tells us more about how a king wanted to be remembered than about what actually happened. The paradox deepens when we realise that this reinterpretation doesn't diminish ancient Egypt's achievements, it makes them more impressive. Creating the world's first unified state through gradual integration and cultural synthesis required far more sophistication than simple military conquest. The real story of Egypt's birth may be more complex than we thought, but it's also more remarkable. The Saqqara bird, ancient aviation? In 1898, French archaeologist Auguste Mariette was digging through the sandy ruins of Saqqara south of Cairo when his team uncovered something that would spark debates for over a century. Inside the tomb of Padi Imen, a priest who lived around 200 BCE, lay a small wooden object that looked like a bird. But this wasn't just any bird carving. The artifact, made from sycamore wood and weighing just over an ounce, had features that seemed strangely familiar to anyone who had ever seen an airplane. The Saqqara bird, as it came to be known, measures 7 inches from wingtip to wingtip. At first glance, it appears to be a simple bird figurine, the kind commonly found in Egyptian tombs, but look closer and the details become puzzling. Unlike typical bird models from ancient Egypt, this one has perfectly straight wings that extend perpendicular from its body. Its tail doesn't curve upward like a bird's, it points straight back like the rudder of an aircraft. Most remarkably, there's what appears to be a vertical tail fin, a feature no living bird possesses but every airplane needs. When the artifact was first catalogued, museum officials simply labelled it as a bird model and placed it in storage with thousands of other ancient Egyptian objects. For decades it sat forgotten until 1969, when Dr. Khalil Messiha, an Egyptian physician and amateur archaeologist, rediscovered it in the basement of the Cairo Museum. Messiha had a background in aviation, and what he saw made him question everything he thought he knew about ancient technology. Messiha noticed that the Saqqara bird's proportions closely matched those of a modern glider. The wings showed a slight upward angle called dihedral, which provides stability in flight. The body was streamlined, and the weight distribution seemed carefully calculated. Most intriguingly, there were small notches on the tail section where a horizontal stabilizer could have been attached. Messiha became convinced that ancient Egyptians had understood the principles of aerodynamics and had built functional flying machines over 2,000 years ago. The claims sparked intense controversy. Aviation experts examined the artifact and found troubling similarities to modern aircraft design. The wing shape, body proportions, and even the mounting hole for the stick suggested this wasn't just decorative art. Computer models revealed that with the addition of a horizontal tail plane, the Saqqara bird could theoretically achieve stable gliding flight. Some researchers built working replicas that successfully flew, though only after adding the missing tail components. But modern scientific analysis tells a more complex story. In 2023, German aerospace engineers conducted the most comprehensive study yet, using computational fluid dynamics to analyse the artifact's aerodynamic properties. Their results were sobering. The Saqqara bird, in its current form, cannot fly. It lacks sufficient lift generation, has poor stability characteristics, and would tumble uncontrollably if launched. The centre of gravity is positioned too far back, and the aerodynamic centre is in the wrong location for stable flight. The engineering analysis revealed fundamental flaws that any civilization with true knowledge of flight would have avoided. The wing design creates excessive drag while producing minimal lift. The pressure distribution along the wings is inefficient compared to even basic airfoil designs. Most critically, the mathematical calculations show that even if launched from a height of 2 meters, the artifact would achieve only seconds of chaotic, unstable movement before crashing. Yet puzzles remain. Why does the Saqqara bird look so much like an airplane? Ancient Egyptian artists were skilled at depicting birds with anatomical accuracy, creating detailed models that clearly represent specific species. But this artifact shows none of those characteristics. Its rigid, geometric form seems deliberately engineered rather than naturally inspired. The straight wings, streamlined body, and vertical tail fin don't match any known bird species from ancient Egypt or anywhere else. Archaeological context adds another layer of mystery. The tomb where the Saqqara bird was found contained other wooden models, including boats and figures engaged in daily activities. These models were meant to serve the deceased in the afterlife, representing things that were important in earthly existence. If the Saqqara bird was just a simple toy or ritual object, why does its design differ so radically from other bird models found in Egyptian tombs? Some researchers suggest the artifact might represent a boomerang or throwing stick, weapons commonly used in ancient Egypt for hunting birds. But the shape doesn't match known examples of these tools, and the mounting hole suggests it was meant to be displayed rather than thrown. Others propose it could be a weather vane or ceremonial standard, but these explanations don't account for its aerodynamically suggestive features. The most intriguing possibility is that the Saqqara bird represents an attempt to understand flight through observation and experimentation. Ancient Egyptians were skilled engineers who built massive pyramids and complex irrigation systems. They observed migrating birds, studied their flight patterns, and may have tried to recreate what they saw in wooden models. The artifact might represent an early, unsuccessful attempt at reverse engineering biological flight. This interpretation gained support from other ancient civilizations that seem to grasp aerodynamic principles. Greek mathematician Akhenaten allegedly built a steam-powered flying dove around 400 BCE. Chinese inventors created bamboo flying toys centuries before the Wright brothers. Ancient cultures worldwide developed boomerangs, kites, and other objects that demonstrate understanding of airflow and lift generation. Modern testing of reconstructed Saqqara birds with added horizontal stabilizers has produced mixed results. Some replicas achieve brief, unstable glides. Others spin out of control immediately. The key factor seems to be the precise positioning and design of the missing tail components, suggesting that if ancient Egyptians did experiment with flight, they may have understood the critical importance of these elements. The engineering evidence forces us to confront an uncomfortable question. How much did our ancestors really know about the natural world? The Saqqara bird may not be proof of ancient aviation, but it demonstrates a level of observation and experimentation that challenges assumptions about technological progress. Whether it represents failed attempts at flight, advanced understanding of aerodynamics, or simply coincidental resemblance to modern aircraft, the artifact reminds us that human curiosity about conquering the skies is far older than we typically imagine. The vanished land of Punt. Somewhere in the ancient world there existed a kingdom so wealthy and mysterious that it captured the imagination of Egypt's greatest pharaohs. They called it Nefertiti, the god's land, a place where incense grew on trees, gold flowed in rivers, and exotic animals roamed free. For over 1,000 years, Egypt's rulers sent expeditions across treacherous waters to trade with this legendary realm. Yet today, despite centuries of searching, archaeologists still can't agree on where this fabled land of Punt actually was. The story of Punt's disappearance from history is as mysterious as its original location. Egyptian records from the Old Kingdom through the New Kingdom are filled with references to trading expeditions to Punt. The walls of Queen Hatshepsut's temple at Deir el-Bahari are covered with detailed reliefs showing the wonders brought back from Punt. Live incense trees carefully transplanted to Egyptian soil, exotic animals including giraffes and baboons, gold, ivory, and precious resins. These weren't occasional trading missions, but regular commercial relationships that lasted over 11 centuries. The ancient Egyptians described their journeys to Punt as epic undertakings, requiring careful preparation and divine protection. They loaded ships with goods to trade, weapons, jewelry, and manufactured items, then sailed down the Red Sea to reach this distant land. The round trip could take years, and the risks were enormous. Pirates, storms, and hostile tribes threatened the expeditions, yet the potential rewards were so great that pharaoh after pharaoh continued sending these dangerous missions. What made Punt so valuable? The answer lies in the luxury goods that formed the foundation of Egyptian religious and royal life. Punt was the primary source of frankincense and myrrh, aromatic resins essential for religious ceremonies and mummification. These weren't merely expensive perfumes, but sacred substances required for communicating with the gods. Without access to Punt's incense, Egypt's religious system would have been fundamentally compromised. But then, sometime during the late New Kingdom period around 1070 BCE, the references to Punt begin to fade from Egyptian records. Trade expeditions that had been regular for over a millennium simply stopped. The last definite reference to a Punt expedition dates to the reign of Ramesses III, and after that, this once crucial trading partner vanishes from Egyptian texts as if it never existed. This disappearance has launched one of archaeology's greatest treasure hunts. For over 150 years, scholars have proposed dozens of locations for Punt, from Somalia and Eritrea to Sudan and even Yemen. Each theory is supported by some evidence but contradicted by others. The search has taken archaeologists across the Horn of Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, and the eastern African coast, but no site has yielded definitive proof that it was the legendary Punt. The most compelling recent breakthrough came from an unexpected source: mummified baboons. In 2020, researchers led by Dr. Nathaniel Dominy at Dartmouth College analysed the chemical signatures in baboon remains found in Egyptian tombs. These sacred baboons were imported from Punt, and by studying isotopes in their teeth and hair, scientists could determine what they ate and drank, information that points to their geographic origin. The baboon analysis suggested that Punt was located somewhere in the modern-day region encompassing eastern Ethiopia, Eritrea, and possibly parts of Somalia. This matches the most widely accepted scholarly consensus, but it still covers a vast area with hundreds of potential archaeological sites. Finding specific Punt settlements within this region remains like searching for a needle in a haystack. Other clues have emerged from botanical studies. The incense trees shown in Hatshepsut's reliefs appear to be Boswellia species, which today grow primarily in Somalia, southern Arabia, and parts of Ethiopia. DNA analysis of ancient plant remains could potentially trace their exact origin, but such samples are extremely rare and difficult to preserve across millennia. Archaeological expeditions continue to scour the proposed Punt regions, searching for evidence of ancient settlements that match Egyptian descriptions. They're looking for ports that could have handled large Egyptian trading ships, towns with evidence of gold working and incense production, and most importantly, artifacts that show direct contact with ancient Egypt. Several promising sites have been discovered, but none has yielded the smoking gun that would definitively identify it as Punt. The mystery deepens when we consider that Punt's disappearance coincides with broader changes in the ancient world. The Late Bronze Age collapse around 1200 BCE disrupted trade networks throughout the eastern Mediterranean and beyond. Sea peoples raided coastal settlements, kingdoms fell, and traditional trade routes became too dangerous to navigate. Perhaps Punt wasn't lost, but simply became inaccessible due to these regional upheavals. Climate change may have played a role as well. Paleoclimatic data suggests that the Horn of Africa experienced significant drought periods during the late New Kingdom period. If Punt's prosperity was based on agriculture and natural resources, extended droughts could have devastated the region's economy and made it an unreliable trading partner. Some researchers have proposed a different explanation entirely. What if Punt never disappeared but simply changed names? Ancient place names often evolved or were replaced when new powers took control. The Punt that Egyptians knew might have been conquered by other peoples who called their territory by a different name. In this scenario, Punt still exists, we just don't recognize it under its modern name. Modern technology is opening new avenues in the search for Punt. Satellite imagery can identify ancient settlements and harbour installations that ground surveys might miss. LiDAR scanning can penetrate jungle canopies to reveal hidden ruins. Underwater archaeology is exploring submerged coastal sites that might have been Punt's ports. Each year brings new discoveries that could potentially solve the mystery. The latest expeditions focus on the Eritrean coast, where Italian archaeologists have found evidence of ancient settlements with Egyptian connections. Pottery shards, bronze artifacts, and architectural remains suggest significant contact between this region and ancient Egypt during the New Kingdom period. Could these ruins finally be the remains of the legendary Punt? The search continues because solving the Punt mystery would do more than satisfy academic curiosity. It would illuminate one of the ancient world's most important trade networks and help us understand how early globalization connected distant civilizations. The land of Punt represents the ancient world's quest for luxury and the exotic. a precursor to the spice routes and silk roads that would later connect continents. Today, archaeologists from multiple countries continue the hunt across the Horn of Africa and beyond, following new leads and testing new theories. Each excavation season brings the possibility that this will be the year Punt is finally found. The Underwater Secrets of Thonis Heraclean picture a Mediterranean morning in the year 2000. French underwater archaeologist Frank Goddio and his team from the European Institute for Underwater Archaeology are scanning the seafloor 7 kilometers off Egypt's coast with sophisticated magnetometers and side-scan sonar. They're searching for traces of ancient Alexandria's legendary harbour, expecting perhaps a few scattered artifacts from the classical world. What they discover instead will force scholars to completely rewrite the history of ancient Egypt's relationship with the Mediterranean world. For centuries, historians had accepted a relatively straightforward narrative about ancient Egypt's maritime connections. Alexandria, founded by Alexander the Great in 331 BCE, was understood to be Egypt's first truly international port city, the grand gateway that opened Egypt to Mediterranean trade and culture. Before Alexandria, scholars believed, Egypt's foreign contacts were limited and sporadic. The pharaohs were seen as insular rulers of a civilization that looked inward toward the Nile rather than outward toward the sea. This accepted version of history was based on the limited evidence available from land-based archaeological sites and classical texts. While ancient writers like Herodotus mentioned mysterious Egyptian port cities, these references were often dismissed as legendary or greatly exaggerated. The physical evidence simply wasn't there to support claims of major Egyptian maritime centres predating Alexandria. But on that summer day in 2000, Goddio's instruments detected massive stone structures beneath 10 metres of Mediterranean water. What emerged from the sandy seafloor over the following months would revolutionise our understanding of ancient Egypt's place in the wider world. They had discovered Thonis Heraclean, a city so completely lost to history that most scholars had doubted it ever existed. The first artefacts to emerge painted a picture that contradicted everything historians thought they knew. Colossal granite statues of pharaohs stood guard over what had once been grand harbour entrances. Massive temple foundations revealed religious complexes that rivaled anything built in the Nile Valley. Most shocking of all, inscriptions in both Egyptian hieroglyphs and Greek letters showed that this had been a truly international city where Egyptian priests worked alongside Greek merchants, where pharaohs welcomed foreign dignitaries, and where the gods of Egypt merged with the deities of Greece. The scale of Thonis Heraclean challenged every assumption about pre-Alexandria Egypt. This wasn't a modest fishing village or seasonal trading post. It was a major urban centre covering over 11 square kilometres, with sophisticated harbour installations, massive temples, and residential districts that housed thousands of people. The archaeological evidence showed that the city had flourished for over 6 centuries, from roughly 800 BCE until its gradual submersion around 700 CE. Perhaps most significantly, the discoveries revealed that Thonis Heraclean had served as Egypt's primary gateway to the Greek world for centuries before Alexandria was even conceived. All foreign ships entering Egypt were required to stop here first, where customs officials collected taxes and priests performed religious ceremonies to ensure the foreigners' safe passage into the sacred land of Egypt. This was Egypt's Ellis Island, its first line of contact with the wider Mediterranean world. The religious discoveries were equally revolutionary. The main temple complex dedicated to Amun-Gereb, a syncretic deity combining the Egyptian god Amun with the Greek hero Heracles, showed how Egyptian and Greek religious traditions had been blending for centuries. Here, Greek visitors would have witnessed Egyptian religious ceremonies while Egyptian priests incorporated Greek mythological elements into their rituals. The city served as a cultural melting pot that predated the famous cosmopolitan atmosphere of Alexandria by hundreds of years. Even more remarkable were the political implications revealed by the artifacts. Stelae found in the temple show that foreign pharaohs, including rulers of Greek and Persian origin, came to Thonis Heracleon to receive legitimate recognition of their rule over Egypt. The city served as a sort of ancient legitimacy checkpoint, where non-Egyptian rulers had to prove their worthiness to govern the land of the pharaohs. This was international diplomacy on a scale that historians had never imagined for pre-Hellenistic Egypt. The economic evidence was equally stunning. Harbour installations capable of handling dozens of large merchant ships standardized weights and measures for international trade, and warehouses filled with goods from across the Mediterranean world. All of this pointed to a commercial operation far more sophisticated than anyone had envisioned for ancient Egypt. Thonis Herakleion wasn't just receiving occasional foreign traders, it was orchestrating complex international commerce on a massive scale. The discovery also solved a puzzle that had bothered classical scholars for generations. Ancient Greek texts mentioned two important Egyptian port cities, Thonis and Herakleion, but could never agree on their relationship to each other. Some sources treated them as separate cities, while others seemed to conflate them. The underwater excavations revealed the truth. They were the same place, known by its Egyptian name Thonis to local inhabitants and by its Greek name Herakleion to foreign visitors. Most importantly, the preservation conditions in the underwater environment had created an archaeological time capsule. Unlike land-based sites that had been plundered, built over, or damaged by centuries of human activity, Thonis Herakleion remained frozen in time beneath the Mediterranean waves. Wooden ships still sat in ancient harbour channels, their hulls intact after 2 millennia underwater. Delicate religious artefacts survived in perfect condition, their inscriptions still clearly readable. Even organic materials like rope, leather and papyrus had been preserved in the oxygen-free environment. The paradigm shift triggered by Thonis Herakleion's discovery extends far beyond Egyptian history. The city reveals that the ancient Mediterranean was far more interconnected than previously thought, with sophisticated trade networks, diplomatic relationships, and cultural exchanges operating centuries before the Roman Empire unified the region. Egypt wasn't an isolated civilization that suddenly opened to the world under Greek rule. It had been an active participant in Mediterranean affairs for nearly a millennium before Alexandria's foundation. The implications continue to unfold as excavations reveal new secrets each field season. Recent discoveries include a second major temple complex, evidence of a thriving residential quarter with multi-story houses, and what appears to be a naval facility for constructing and maintaining Egypt's Mediterranean fleet. Each new find reinforces the picture of a civilization far more globally connected and technologically sophisticated than traditional narratives suggested. The underwater city represents the ancient world's version of globalization, a place where different cultures, religions, economies, and political systems merged and influenced each other. It shows us that the human impulse toward international connection and cultural exchange is far older than we imagined, and that the barriers between ancient civilizations were far more permeable than textbooks typically suggest. The Great Pyramid's hidden chamber. In November 2017, physicists made an announcement that sent shockwaves through the archaeological world. Deep inside the Great Pyramid of Giza, they had discovered something that had been hidden for over 4,500 years, a massive void, roughly the size of a passenger jet lurking above the Grand Gallery. But here's what made this discovery so extraordinary. They found it without moving a single stone, drilling a single hole, or even entering the pyramid with traditional tools. Instead, they used cosmic rays from outer space. The story begins with a fundamental problem that has frustrated Egyptologists for centuries. Despite being one of the most studied structures on Earth, the Great Pyramid still guards its secrets. We know about 3 main chambers: the King's Chamber, the Queen's Chamber, and a subterranean chamber carved into bedrock. But mathematical calculations of the pyramid's volume suggest there should be more empty space inside. The question was, where? Traditional archaeological methods hit a wall when dealing with the pyramid. You cannot simply excavate through millions of tons of limestone blocks. Ground-penetrating radar works only for shallow depths. Drilling exploratory holes risks damaging the monument. For generations, archaeologists could only guess what lay hidden within those massive stone walls. Then in 2015, an international team called Scan Pyramids launched an ambitious project. Their weapon of choice wasn't a shovel or a drill, it was Morn radiography, a technique that sounds like science fiction but relies on basic particle physics. High-energy cosmic rays constantly bombard Earth from space. When these rays hit our atmosphere, they create particles called muons that can penetrate solid matter, including stone. Dense materials absorb more muons, while empty spaces allow more to pass through. By placing sensitive detectors inside the pyramid and measuring the muons streaming down from above, scientists could create a kind of X-ray image of the interior structure. If there were hidden chambers, more muons would pass through those areas compared to the solid stone surrounding them. The team installed 3 different types of muon detectors at various locations within the pyramid. Nuclear emulsion films went into the Queen's chamber. Electronic scintillation detectors were positioned at other strategic points. Gas-filled detectors were set up outside the pyramid. Each technology worked independently, providing multiple ways to cross-check the results. For months, the detectors quietly recorded the cosmic ray bombardment. The data that emerged was remarkable. All 3 detector systems showed the same thing: a clear excess of muons coming from a specific area above the Grand Gallery. The signal was unmistakable. There was definitely empty space where solid stone should be. The void appeared to be at least 30 meters long and several meters high, with a volume comparable to the Grand Gallery itself. Its position, roughly 17 meters above the Grand Gallery and aligned with it, suggested this was not some random cavity but likely an intentional architectural feature. But the discovery immediately sparked fierce debate. Zahi Hawass, Egypt's most prominent archaeologist and former Minister of Antiquities, dismissed the findings. He argued that pyramids naturally contain many small voids and gaps, and this detection might simply be picking up a collection of such spaces rather than a single large chamber. The technology, while impressive, could not definitively prove whether the void was one large room or multiple smaller spaces. Other Egyptologists questioned the interpretation of the data. The muon readings showed empty space, but they'd revealed nothing about what that space contained or its original purpose. Was it a hidden burial chamber? A stress-relieving cavity built into the pyramid structure? A passage leading to other undiscovered areas? The cosmic rays could only show that something was there, not what it was. The international team stood by their findings, pointing out that 3 completely different technologies had independently confirmed the anomaly. The statistical significance of their measurements was extremely high. This was not some marginal signal that could be explained away by measurement errors or natural variations in the stone. Additional discoveries followed. In 2023, the team announced they had also detected a corridor-shaped void near the pyramid's entrance. Using tiny robotic cameras inserted through existing joints in the stonework, they confirmed this smaller space was indeed a genuine corridor, about 9 meters long and 2 meters high. The verification of this smaller void lent credibility to the larger discovery. If the technology could accurately detect and characterize the corridor, it suggested the bigger void was equally real. Yet the debate continues to rage among Egyptologists about what these spaces represent. Some researchers propose the large void might be a second Grand Gallery, built as part of the pyramid's original design but sealed off for unknown reasons. Others suggest it could be a burial chamber for undiscovered artifacts or even human remains. Still others argue it might serve a purely structural purpose, helping distribute the enormous weight of the stone blocks above. The technology itself has sparked almost as much discussion as the discovery. Muon radiography was originally developed for examining nuclear reactors and detecting concealed nuclear materials. Its application to archaeology represents a revolutionary fusion of particle physics and historical investigation. The success at Giza has inspired similar projects at other ancient sites around the world. But the technique also has limitations that critics are quick to point out. It can detect voids, but cannot determine their precise shape or internal contents. The resolution is relatively coarse. It can miss smaller chambers or misinterpret complex internal structures. Most importantly, it cannot answer the fundamental questions that matter to archaeologists. Who built these spaces? When? Why? The mystery deepens when you consider the pyramid's known construction techniques. The builders clearly understood structural engineering well enough to create the existing chambers and passages. If they built additional voids, they must have had specific purposes in mind. The alignment with the Grand Gallery suggests these spaces were not accidental, but part of a deliberate architectural plan. Modern analysis of the pyramid's construction has revealed extraordinary precision in the placement of internal chambers and passages. Every known feature appears to serve either a structural function or relates to the burial rituals of Pharaoh Khufu. The newly discovered void disrupts our understanding of this carefully planned interior layout. What makes the discovery even more intriguing is what the muon data cannot yet tell us about access. Are these spaces completely sealed, or do hidden passages connect them to the known chambers? The ancient Egyptians were masters of concealed doorways and hidden passages. Recent discoveries at other pyramids have revealed secret shafts and chambers that remained undetected for millennia. The pyramid construction mystery. The morning sun casts sharp shadows across the Giza plateau, illuminating one of humanity's most enduring puzzles. The Great Pyramid stands exactly where it has for over 4.5 millennia, its massive limestone blocks perfectly fitted together without mortar, its internal chambers aligned with astronomical precision. Engineers armed with laser levels and computer-controlled machinery study its construction and shake their heads in amazement. How did ancient workers, using supposedly primitive tools, achieve tolerances that modern construction struggles to match? In 1883, British archaeologist William Flinders Petrie arrived at Giza with the most precise measuring instruments available. What he discovered challenged everything Victorian scholars believed about ancient capabilities. The pyramid's base was level to within just 2.1 centimeters across its entire 230-meter width. The difference between its longest and shortest sides was only 2 centimeters. Most remarkably, Petrie found granite cores drilled with such precision that the spiral cutting marks were still visible, showing feed rates and rotational speeds that matched modern diamond-tipped equipment. This creates an immediate paradox. According to conventional archaeology, the pyramid builders worked with copper tools, wooden sledges, and rope. Copper, even when hardened, has a hardness rating of about 3 on the Mohs scale. Granite measures 6 to 7. You cannot cut a harder material with a softer one, yet the evidence shows extensive granite cutting throughout the pyramid complex. The king's chamber contains precisely fitted granite blocks weighing up to 70 tons each, cut and positioned with tolerances measured in millimeters. The drilling evidence is perhaps most puzzling. Petrie discovered granite drill cores showing perfect cylindrical holes, with feed marks indicating the drill advanced 1 inch for every 6 rotations. Modern experiments using copper tubes and sand abrasives, as proposed by traditional theories, create rough, irregular holes without the characteristic spiral markings found on ancient cores. Only when researchers use industrial diamonds or tungsten carbide bits do they achieve similar results. The engineering challenges multiply when you consider the pyramid's internal precision. The king's chamber measures exactly twice as long as it is wide, with walls that are perfectly perpendicular and corners that are precisely square. The chamber's granite beams weigh between 25 and 80 tons each, yet they were lifted over 60 meters into the air and positioned with such accuracy that you cannot slip a knife blade between the joints. Even more perplexing is the Great Pyramid's mathematical properties. Its height-to-base ratio encodes the value of pi. Its internal angles correspond to important astronomical alignments. Its orientation to true north is accurate to within 3.4 arc minutes, more precise than Greenwich Observatory when it was built. These are not coincidences that occur through trial and error with primitive tools. The construction logistics alone defy conventional explanations. Traditional estimates suggest the pyramid contains 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing between 2.5 and 15 tons. If built over 20 years, as historical records suggest, workers would have had to quarry, transport, and precisely position 1 block every 2 minutes during daylight hours. This assumes perfect efficiency with no breaks, no mistakes, and no time lost to weather or logistics. Modern stone cutting provides troubling comparisons. Professional masons using diamond wire saws, hydraulic splitters, and precision cutting equipment struggle to achieve the surface finishes visible on pyramid blocks. The casing stones that once covered the entire pyramid were fitted so precisely that the joints between them were nearly invisible. The surface was so smooth and reflective that ancient historians described it as appearing like a single seamless structure. Recent analysis has revealed even more sophisticated techniques. Core samples from pyramid blocks show evidence of internal stress patterns that suggest controlled cooling, a technique used in modern concrete but supposedly unknown to ancient builders. Chemical analysis of the mortar used in some joints reveals properties that modern cement chemists are still trying to understand. Some samples show aggregate bonding stronger than the limestone blocks themselves. The quarrying evidence presents additional mysteries. The nearby limestone quarries show tool marks consistent with massive extraction operations, but the precision of the cuts suggests equipment far more advanced than copper chisels. Some quarry faces show perfectly parallel horizontal lines separated by exactly 90 centimeters, the standard height of pyramid blocks. This implies a level of systematic planning and execution that challenges assumptions about ancient organizational capabilities. Underground chambers reveal even more sophisticated engineering. The subterranean chamber, carved directly from bedrock, shows tooling marks from precision cutting equipment. The walls are perfectly flat, the corners precisely square, and the ceiling follows exact geometric proportions. Achieving such precision while working in cramped, poorly lit conditions would challenge modern equipment operators. The pyramid's acoustic properties add another layer of mystery. The king's chamber resonates at exactly 55 Hz when empty, the same frequency that can cause humans to experience altered states of consciousness. The chamber's dimensions create specific harmonic ratios that suggest the builders understood advanced principles of acoustics and resonance. Whether this was intentional or coincidental remains hotly debated. Researchers have proposed various explanations for these anomalies. Some suggest the ancient Egyptians possessed advanced metallurgy knowledge that allowed them to create harder metal alloys. Others propose they used abrasives like emery or even diamond dust imported from distant lands. Still others argue for sophisticated engineering techniques involving precision levering, controlled demolition, and assembly line production methods. Computer modelling of proposed construction methods reveals consistent problems. Ramp systems require more building material than the pyramid itself. Lever-based lifting systems cannot generate the forces needed for the heaviest blocks. Even modern cranes would struggle with some of the lifting and positioning challenges the builders faced. Each proposed solution creates new problems that seem equally difficult to solve. The precision extends beyond just the Great Pyramid. Throughout the Giza complex, granite and limestone blocks show evidence of advanced cutting techniques. The Valley Temple contains granite blocks fitted so precisely that modern equipment cannot detect the joints. The Sphinx Temple incorporates massive limestone blocks, some weighing over 200 tons, cut and positioned with the same mysterious precision. Perhaps most puzzling is that this advanced construction technology appears suddenly in the archaeological record and then largely disappears. Earlier pyramids show cruder construction techniques, while later ones demonstrate declining capabilities. The Fourth Dynasty seems to represent a technological peak that was never again achieved in ancient Egypt. This contradicts normal patterns of technological development, where capabilities build gradually over time. The Sphinx water erosion enigma. Walk past any tourist on the Giza plateau, and they'll tell you the Great Sphinx has watched over Egypt for 4,500 years. But deep grooves carved into the limestone tell a different story. These weathered scars challenge everything we thought we knew about ancient Egypt's timeline. The accepted story is straightforward. Around 2500 BCE, during the Fourth Dynasty, Pharaoh Khafre ordered workers to carve the Sphinx from a limestone knoll beside his pyramid. The monument would display his divine power, part human intelligence, part lion strength. For over a century, this dating has been taught in universities and written in textbooks. But in 1990, a Boston University geologist named Robert Schoch examined the Sphinx and noticed something unsettling. The vertical erosion patterns cutting deep into the Sphinx's body didn't match what wind and sand should produce. Instead, they looked exactly like the work of flowing water, heavy, sustained rainfall, the kind Egypt hasn't seen for thousands of years. John Anthony West, an independent researcher, had first raised this possibility in the 1970s. But it took Schoch's geological expertise to turn speculation into scientific inquiry. When Schoch published his findings, he ignited controversy that still burns today. If water carved these erosion patterns, the Sphinx must date to a time when Egypt received far more rainfall than it does now. Egypt's last period of substantial rainfall ended around 10,000 years ago, during what geologists call the African humid period. If Schoch is correct, the Sphinx could be twice as old as mainstream archaeology believes, or even older. The implications stagger the imagination. A monument predating pharaonic Egypt would require us to completely rewrite the story of human civilization. It would mean an unknown culture possessed the organizational skills and artistic vision to create one of history's most recognizable monuments millennia before the first pyramid was built. Archaeological evidence, however, points in a different direction. The Sphinx sits within Khafre's pyramid complex, integrated into the overall design. A causeway connects Khafre's pyramid to the Sphinx temple, suggesting they were planned together. More importantly, researchers have found no traces of any predynastic civilization capable of such monumental construction. Mark Lerner, perhaps America's leading Sphinx expert, spent decades excavating around the monument. His work revealed tool marks on the Sphinx's body consistent with copper and stone implements used during the Old Kingdom. The unfinished state of the adjacent Sphinx temple also suggests construction stopped abruptly, exactly what we might expect if Khafra died before completion. Lerner argues that the erosion patterns Schoch identified can be explained without invoking prehistoric rainfall. The Giza Plateau experiences occasional flooding from groundwater and rare desert storms. Over thousands of years, these water sources could produce the erosion we see today. He also points out that different parts of the Sphinx show different erosion patterns, suggesting multiple causes rather than sustained rainfall. The geological community remains divided. Some researchers support Schoch's interpretation, noting that the Sphinx enclosure walls show the same vertical erosion patterns found on the monument itself. If wind and sand were responsible, they argue, we should see horizontal wearing patterns, not deep vertical channels. Others question whether the limestone quality itself explains the erosion. The Sphinx was carved from different geological layers, each with varying hardness and chemical composition. Softer layers would naturally erode faster than harder ones, potentially creating the patterns that appear to be water damage. Climate data adds another layer of complexity. While Egypt's rainfall dramatically decreased after 10,000 years ago, the transition wasn't immediate. Some regions experienced periodic wet phases as late as 6,000 years ago. Could the Sphinx erosion result from these later humid periods rather than requiring a prehistoric origin? The dating controversy extends beyond geology into archaeology itself. No inscriptions on the Sphinx identify its builder, unlike most major Egyptian monuments. The earliest written reference to the monument appears on a stone tablet placed between its paws by Thutmose IV around 1400 BCE, over 1,000 years after Khafra's death. This tablet, known as the Dream Stela, mentions restoration work but says nothing about the original construction. Recent discoveries have added new questions to old puzzles. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have detected several unexplored chambers beneath the Sphinx, including what appears to be a rectangular structure directly below the monument. These hidden spaces could contain evidence for either dating theory, but Egyptian authorities have been reluctant to permit invasive exploration. The water erosion hypothesis faces one fundamental problem: the absence of any supporting archaeological evidence for a sophisticated predynastic civilization. If an advanced culture existed in Egypt before 7000 BCE, where are their tools, pottery, and settlements? Why do we find no artistic traditions leading up to the Sphinx's creation? Schoch acknowledges this archaeological silence but suggests future discoveries might fill these gaps. He points out that much of early Egypt remains unexcavated, particularly areas now covered by the Nile Delta's shifting sediments. Meanwhile, traditional Egyptologists continue finding evidence supporting the conventional 4th dynasty dating. Recent analysis of mortar found in the Sphinx temple matches samples from Khafra's pyramid complex, suggesting contemporary construction. The architectural styles of both structures also align with established Old Kingdom design principles. The debate has persisted for over 30 years without resolution. Each camp interprets the same evidence differently, reflecting deeper disagreements about how we understand ancient civilizations. The water erosion patterns that convinced Schoch remain clearly visible today, carved into stone like a permanent question mark challenging our assumptions about the past. The death of the boy king. On a winter day in 1922, Howard Carter peered through a small hole into a tomb that had been sealed for over 3,000 years. Behind him stood Lord Carnarvon, holding a candle to illuminate whatever lay beyond. "Can you see anything?" Carnarvon asked. Carter's famous reply became archaeological legend. Yes, wonderful things. But hidden within those wonderful things lay a mystery that would haunt researchers for decades. How did an 18-year-old pharaoh die so suddenly that his tomb had to be prepared in just 70 days? The first clues emerged from the mummy itself. When Carter's team unwrapped Tutankhamun in 1925, they found a young man frozen in time, his body preserved in the desert heat of the Valley of the Kings. But something was wrong. The king's chest was missing, apparently removed during mummification. More disturbing, his rib showed signs of being broken before death. For decades, these observations fueled speculation. Had the boy king been murdered? Was this the result of a power struggle at the end of the troubled 18th dynasty? The political situation certainly provided motives. Ancient Egypt was emerging from the chaos of the Amarna period when Tutankhamun's predecessor, Akhenaten, had turned Egyptian religion upside down. The young pharaoh had worked to restore the old gods, but this may have made him enemies among those who benefited from the revolutionary changes. The murder theory gained credibility in 1968 when Professor Ronald Harrison of the University of Liverpool took the first X-rays of Tutankhamun's skull. The images revealed something chilling: loose bone fragments floating inside the cranium, along with what appeared to be a shadow at the base of the skull. Harrison concluded that the young king had suffered a violent blow to the head that caused fatal brain injury. This evidence seemed to support a growing conspiracy theory. Two powerful men stood closest to the throne when Tutankhamun died: I, his elderly vizier, and Horemheb, the ambitious general who commanded Egypt's armies. Both had the means and opportunity to orchestrate the young pharaoh's death. I actually married Tutankhamun's widow, Akhenaten, and assumed the crown, suggesting a planned succession. Meanwhile, Horemheb waited in the wings, eventually seizing power from I after a brief 4-year reign. But Harrison's X-ray evidence had limitations. The images were taken 40 years after Carter's team had roughly handled the mummy, using hammers and chisels to remove the burial mask. Could the bone fragments result from this damage rather than ancient trauma? The uncertainty demanded better evidence. That evidence arrived in January 2005, when Egyptian authorities authorized the first CT scan of Tutankhamun's mummy. Unlike X-rays, which produce flat images, Connecticut scans create detailed 3D pictures of internal structures. Dr. Zahi Hawass led an international team of radiologists and Egyptologists in this groundbreaking investigation. The results challenged everything researchers thought they knew about the young king's death. The CT scan revealed no evidence of a fatal head injury. The bone fragments Harrison had detected were likely created during the 1925 autopsy, not 3,300 years ago. The shadow at the skull's base appeared to be hardened embalming resin, not blood from trauma. However, the scan revealed a different kind of evidence. Tutankhamun's left thigh bone showed a severe fracture just above the knee. Unlike the skull damage, this break showed no signs of healing, indicating it occurred shortly before death. The fracture was so severe it would have torn through skin and muscle, creating an open wound in an era before antibiotics. The investigation took another turn in 2010 when DNA analysis added a new chapter to the mystery. Dr. Hawass and his team extracted genetic material from Tutankhamun's mummy and compared it to other royal mummies. The results painted a disturbing picture of the young pharaoh's health. DNA evidence confirmed what historians had long suspected. Tutankhamun was the product of incest between siblings. His father was Akhenaten, and his mother was one of Akhenaten's sisters. This genetic heritage had devastating consequences. The young king suffered from multiple congenital disorders, including a clubfoot, cleft palate, and spinal curvature. His immune system was likely compromised from birth. More importantly, DNA testing revealed traces of malaria parasites in Tutankhamun's tissues. Specifically, the most deadly strain, Plasmodium falciparum. This discovery suggested the young pharaoh died not from a single catastrophic injury, but from a perfect storm of circumstances. The emerging picture shows a frail young man struggling with genetic disorders and repeated bouts of malaria. The severe leg fracture may have been the final blow to an already weakened system. Unable to fight infection in the open wound, and with his immune system compromised by disease and inbreeding, Tutankhamun likely died from septicemia or complications from malaria. Yet questions remain about the circumstances surrounding that fatal leg injury. Was it truly an accident? The break was severe enough to suggest a significant fall or impact. Some researchers now theorize the young pharaoh may have fallen from a chariot during a hunting expedition or military campaign. Others suggest he could have been pushed or struck, making his death both accidental and intentional. The political aftermath adds another layer of mystery. A's rapid marriage to Tutankhamun's widow and assumption of royal titles suggests advanced planning. Did he know the young king was dying? Archaeological evidence shows I was already preparing a royal tomb for himself in the Valley of the Kings, despite being only a vizier at the time. Meanwhile, correspondence discovered in Turkish archives reveals that Tutankhamun's widow sent desperate letters to the Hittite king, Egypt's enemy, begging him to send a prince she could marry rather than be forced to wed a servant. This suggests she was being coerced into marriage against her will, possibly as part of a palace conspiracy. Modern forensic techniques have eliminated some theories while raising new questions about power, politics, and the mysterious death of Egypt's most famous pharaoh. The boy king who died too young continues to guard his final secrets, leaving us to wonder whether his death was murder, accident, or the tragic result of royal genetics gone wrong. The Akhenaten Revolution. For over 3,000 years, ancient Egypt had worshipped hundreds of gods. Ra sailed across the sky in his solar bark. Osiris ruled the underworld. Hathor blessed love and beauty. This was the natural order, as unchanging as the Nile's annual flood. Then around 1353 BCE, a young pharaoh named Amenhotep IV ascended the throne and did the unthinkable. He declared that only one god existed, and that God was the Aten, the visible disk of the sun. Within just a few years, he would change his name to Akhenaten, abandon Egypt's ancient capital, and attempt to erase 3 millennia of religious tradition. For decades, scholars accepted this narrative of radical monotheistic revolution, but recent archaeological discoveries have revealed a far more complex story. The traditional account seems straightforward. Akhenaten proclaimed himself the sole intermediary between humanity and the Aten. He closed temples, disbanded priesthoods, and ordered the names of the old gods chiseled from monuments. Most dramatically, he abandoned Thebes, Egypt's religious center, and built an entirely new capital city called Akhenaten, the horizon of the Aten, in the remote desert of Middle Egypt. Here, at the site now known as Amarna, the pharaoh and his beautiful queen Nefertiti would worship the one true god in magnificent temples open to the sky. This revolutionary vision lasted only 17 years. After Akhenaten's death, his successors systematically destroyed his legacy. They abandoned Amarna, restored the old temples, and tried to erase the heretic pharaoh from history so thoroughly that his name disappeared from king lists for over 3,000 years. But in 1977, when archaeologist Barry Kemp began excavating Amarna for the Egypt Exploration Society, he uncovered evidence that challenged this neat narrative of religious revolution. Kemp focused his attention on a small settlement behind the main city, the workmen's village, where the craftsmen who built Akhenaten's capital actually lived. What Kemp found there was remarkable. In house after house, excavators discovered domestic shrines, small chapels, and religious artifacts that had nothing to do with the official worship of the Aten. Instead, they found evidence of Egypt's traditional gods, the very deities Akhenaten had supposedly banned from his kingdom. The most common discoveries were images of Bes, the dwarf god who protected pregnant women and children. Hundreds of Bes figurines, amulets, and domestic decorations emerged from the workers' houses. Even more surprising, archaeologists found representations of Taweret, the hippopotamus goddess who presided over childbirth. These were not hidden contraband, but openly displayed household religious items. The evidence grew more intriguing as excavations continued. Workers had painted images of traditional gods directly on their house walls. One dwelling contained a beautiful painting of Bes figures in a domestic scene. Others revealed amulets dedicated to Hathor, the cow goddess of love and beauty, whose sacred necklaces were apparently worn openly despite the official ban on traditional deities. These discoveries forced a fundamental re-examination of the Amarna period. If Akhenaten had truly imposed strict monotheism, how could his own workers openly worship banned gods in his capital city? Either the pharaoh's religious police were remarkably ineffective, or the reality of the Amarna revolution was far different from the official propaganda. Further excavations revealed that private religious practice extended well beyond the workers' village. Throughout Amarna, archaeologists have found evidence of continuing traditional worship. Protective amulets, healing magic texts, and household shrines dedicated to various gods suggest that ordinary Egyptians never fully embraced Akhenaten's monotheistic vision. Even more surprising, some evidence suggests that members of the royal court maintained private devotion to traditional deities. Excavations in elite residential areas have uncovered sophisticated religious objects that would have been completely forbidden if Akhenaten's revolution was as absolute as once believed. This archaeological evidence has led scholars to reconsider the nature of Akhenaten's religious reforms. Rather than imposing true monotheism, the pharaoh may have focused primarily on eliminating the powerful priesthoods that threatened royal authority. By closing major temples and disbanding their wealthy clergy, Akhenaten could consolidate political power while allowing ordinary Egyptians to continue their traditional religious practices in private. The revelations from Amarna also illuminate the speed with which Egypt returned to traditional worship after Akhenaten's death. If the old religion had been truly suppressed for 17 years, the restoration would have taken decades. Instead, Tutankhamun and his successors accomplished it within just a few years, suggesting that traditional religious knowledge and practices had survived throughout the Amarna period. Modern analysis of Amarna's art and architecture has revealed additional layers of complexity. While official depictions show the royal family worshipping only the Aten, subtle details suggest continuing influence of traditional Egyptian religious concepts. The Aten itself is depicted with hands offering Ankh symbols, adopting iconography from older solar deities. Royal artwork incorporates traditional symbols of divine kingship that predated the Amarna revolution. Recent DNA analysis has added another dimension to understanding Akhenaten's reign. The pharaoh suffered from serious genetic disorders that may have influenced his religious thinking. Some scholars now wonder whether his visions of a single benevolent sun god reflected personal spiritual experiences shaped by his physical condition. The archaeological record from Amarna has fundamentally changed how historians understand ancient Egyptian religion and politics. Rather than experiencing a complete religious revolution, Egypt appears to have undergone a complex period of official religious change layered over persistent traditional practices. Akhenaten's revolution was real, but it was primarily an elite phenomenon that never fully penetrated Egyptian society. These discoveries reveal how ordinary people navigate periods of dramatic political and religious change, maintaining their deepest beliefs while adapting to new official requirements. The workers who built Akhenaten's revolutionary city continued worshipping the gods their families had honoured for generations, creating a hidden religious landscape that survived beneath the surface of royal propaganda. The missing queen Nefertiti. In 1912, German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt made one of the most famous discoveries in the history of Egyptology. Working at the ancient city of Amarna, he uncovered a painted limestone bust of a woman whose beauty has captivated the world for over a century. The sculpture showed Nefertiti, the great royal wife of Pharaoh Akhenaten, in all her elegant glory. Her elongated neck, high cheekbones and serene expression became the face that launched 1,000 museum visits. But that magnificent bust also highlighted one of archaeology's most enduring puzzles: where is the actual queen? Nefertiti vanished from the historical record around 1336 BCE, during the final years of her husband's revolutionary reign. For a queen who had been depicted in royal art more than any other pharaoh's wife in Egyptian history, her sudden disappearance was startling. One day she was prominently featured in temple reliefs and royal ceremonies, actively participating in the worship of the sun disk Aten alongside her husband. Then, without explanation, she simply wasn't there anymore. The political situation surrounding her disappearance was chaotic. Akhenaten had turned Egyptian religion upside down, abandoning the traditional gods to worship only the Aten. He moved the capital from Thebes to his new city at Amarna, dragging the entire royal court into the desert. Nefertiti had been his partner in this religious revolution, appearing in art as an equal participant in royal duties. Some reliefs even show her performing kingly actions, like smiting Egypt's enemies, traditionally reserved only for pharaohs. But the Amarna experiment was failing. Egypt's empire was crumbling as foreign territories rebelled against pharaonic rule. The economy struggled under the costs of building a new capital city. Traditional priests and nobles plotted against the revolutionary changes. By the final years of Akhenaten's reign, something had gone terribly wrong, and Nefertiti disappeared right when her husband's kingdom needed stability most. Various theories attempt to explain her vanishing. Some scholars believe she died of natural causes, perhaps during a plague that struck Amarna around this time. Others suggest she fell from political favour, possibly due to disagreements with Akhenaten about religious or foreign policy. The most intriguing theory proposes that she didn't disappear at all, but instead assumed a new identity as the mysterious pharaoh Nefertiti, who ruled briefly after Akhenaten's death. The search for Nefertiti's remains began almost as soon as Egyptology emerged as a scientific discipline. Early excavations at Amarna found the unfinished royal tomb where Akhenaten and his family were supposed to be buried, but the tomb was empty except for fragments of sarcophagi and some human remains that might have belonged to Akhenaten's daughter Akhenaten. There was no sign of Nefertiti. When the focus shifted to the Valley of the Kings, where most New Kingdom royalty was buried, hopes rose that her tomb might be hidden among the dozens of sepulchres carved into the cliffs. Theodore Davis, an American lawyer who financed numerous excavations, discovered tomb KV 55 in 1907. Inside lay a mysterious mummy whose identity sparked decades of debate. Could this be Nefertiti? Subsequent analysis revealed the remains belonged to a young man, probably Akhenaten himself, not the missing queen. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922 raised new possibilities. If the boy king was Nefertiti's stepson or adopted son, perhaps she had been buried nearby. Howard Carter and his team searched extensively around KV 62 but found only empty foundation deposits and unused burial equipment. The area seemed to hold no more royal tombs. Hope revived in 2015 when British Egyptologist Nicholas Reeves made a startling announcement. Using high-resolution images of Tutankhamun's burial chamber, he claimed to have identified sealed doorways hidden behind the decorated walls. Computer analysis revealed straight lines and subtle colour differences that suggested plastered-over entrances. Reeves theorised that these doorways led to chambers containing Nefertiti's burial. His hypothesis was revolutionary. Perhaps Tutankhamun's tomb was actually part of a larger sepulchre originally built for Nefertiti. When the young pharaoh died unexpectedly, his burial equipment would have been hastily installed in the outer chambers, while Nefertiti's mummy remained undisturbed in the inner rooms. This would explain the tomb's unusual layout and the seemingly rushed nature of Tutankhamun's burial. The Egyptian government authorized ground-penetrating radar scans to investigate Reeves's claims. In 2016, Japanese radar specialist Hirokatsu Watanabe conducted the first survey and detected what he described as changes in the density behind both the north and west walls of the burial chamber. The findings seem to support the hidden chamber theory, generating worldwide excitement about potentially discovering intact royal burial chambers, but subsequent radar surveys produced conflicting results. A second scan by American researchers using different equipment found no evidence of hidden chambers. Their data showed only solid bedrock behind the decorated walls. A third investigation in 2018, conducted by Italian experts using the most advanced radar technology available, also failed to detect void spaces that would indicate hidden rooms. The search for Nefertiti has expanded beyond the Valley of the Kings. Some researchers believe she might have been buried at Amarna after all, in a tomb that remains undiscovered. Others suggest her mummy could be among the unidentified remains found in various tombs throughout Egypt. The Egyptian Museum in Cairo houses several mysterious female mummies from the Amarna period that could potentially be Nefertiti. DNA analysis has added a new dimension to the search. In 2010, genetic testing of royal mummies revealed family relationships among the Amarna period rulers. The results showed that a female mummy found in tomb KV-21, designated KV-21A, could be Tutankhamun's mother. If this identification is correct, and if Nefertiti was indeed Tutankhamun's mother, as some theories suggest, then this anonymous mummy might be the missing queen. Recent excavations have uncovered tantalizing clues that keep the search alive. In 2019, archaeologists working near Saqqara discovered a tomb belonging to a royal wet nurse from the Amarna period. The woman had served Tutankhamun as a child, and her burial included canopic jars and other equipment that might provide insights into royal burial practices during this chaotic period. The quest for Nefertiti has also led researchers to examine museum collections around the world. Many artifacts from Amarna were collected during early excavations and dispersed to museums before their significance was fully understood. Some of these objects might contain clues about the Queen's fate or final resting place. Advanced technology continues to offer new possibilities for discovery. Satellite archaeology has identified possible tomb entrances in remote areas of the Valley of the Kings and surrounding cliffs. Ground-penetrating radar surveys now cover larger areas more efficiently than ever before. Each new survey raises hope that Nefertiti's burial place might finally be located. The missing queen has become more than just an archaeological puzzle. Her disappearance represents one of the last great mysteries of pharaonic Egypt, a treasure hunt that combines cutting-edge science with old-fashioned detective work. Every new tomb discovery, every improved imaging technique, and every DNA analysis raises the possibility that this year might finally be the year when Nefertiti is found. The search continues across Egypt's ancient cemeteries and forgotten corners, driven by the knowledge that somewhere in the desert, one of history's most beautiful and powerful women lies waiting to tell her story. The quest for Queen Nefertiti remains archaeology's most glamorous unsolved case. The mummy in foreign wrappings. Picture this. You're examining an ancient mummy, expecting to find traditional Egyptian linen wrappings covered in hieroglyphs. Instead, you discover text in a completely foreign language. Not Egyptian, not Greek, not Latin. This exact scenario unfolded in 1848 when a Croatian nobleman purchased what appeared to be a typical Egyptian mummy in Alexandria's bustling antiquities market. For nearly 2 decades, this mummy sat quietly in Zagreb, arousing little curiosity. After all, Egyptian mummies were prized possessions among European collectors, and this one seemed ordinary enough. The preserved remains of a woman from Egypt's Ptolemaic period. But in the 1860s, when scholars finally examined the bandages more closely, they made a discovery that would challenge everything they thought they knew about ancient Mediterranean connections. The wrappings weren't covered in Egyptian hieroglyphs or demotic script. Instead, they bore the longest Etruscan text ever discovered. Over 1,200 words written on linen strips that had been carefully cut and used to wrap this Egyptian woman. The implications were staggering. How did an Etruscan religious text, written in Italy centuries before Christ, end up wrapped around an Egyptian mummy in Alexandria? The initial investigation revealed the mummy's identity through a papyrus scroll found with her remains. Her name was Nesi-Hensu, wife of Paher-Hensu, a tailor from Thebes. She had died sometime during the late or Ptolemaic period, roughly between the 3rd and 1st centuries BCE. The carbon dating and mummification techniques confirmed she was authentically Egyptian. But those wrappings told a completely different story. The Etruscan text, now called the Liber Linteus or Linen Book, appeared to be a religious calendar detailing rituals and ceremonies. Scholars could identify references to Etruscan gods, ritual dates, and ceremonial procedures. The writing style suggested it originated in the 4th century BCE, making it not only the longest Etruscan text but potentially the oldest surviving European book. But here's where the mystery deepens. How did this precious Etruscan religious document travel from Italy to Egypt, only to be cut into strips and used as mummy wrappings? This wasn't some casual reuse of old cloth. Religious texts in the ancient world were sacred objects, carefully preserved and protected. Several theories emerged to explain this cultural crossover. The first suggested that Nesi-Hensu herself might have been Etruscan. Perhaps a wealthy woman who had fled to Egypt during Rome's conquest of Etruria in the 3rd century BCE. When she died in her adopted homeland, her family might have wrapped her in the sacred text she had brought from Italy, combining Egyptian mummification with Etruscan religious tradition. Another theory proposed that the linen book had simply been traded or sold as valuable fabric. In the Ptolemaic period, Egypt was a cosmopolitan hub where goods from across the Mediterranean flowed freely. Perhaps the text had lost its religious significance by the time it reached Alexandria's markets, becoming just expensive foreign linen suitable for mummification. A third possibility emerged from understanding the complex cultural dynamics of Ptolemaic Egypt. The Greek rulers who controlled Egypt after Alexander's conquest encouraged trade and cultural exchange. Etruscan merchants fleeing Roman expansion might have established communities in Alexandria, bringing their religious texts with them. When community members died, these sacred writings could have been repurposed for burial rites. Modern analysis has revealed even more intriguing details. The linen itself shows evidence of having been deliberately cut and prepared for mummification. This wasn't hasty reuse, but careful, intentional repurposing. The way the text was arranged on Nesi-Hensu's body followed traditional Egyptian mummification patterns, suggesting the embalmers were familiar with both cultures' burial practices. What makes this discovery truly revolutionary is what it reveals about ancient Mediterranean connectivity. For decades, historians had viewed ancient civilizations as relatively isolated, with limited cultural exchange. The Zagreb mummy proved otherwise. It demonstrated that religious texts could travel hundreds of miles, cross cultural boundaries, and be meaningfully integrated into foreign burial practices. The mummy also highlighted the cosmopolitan nature of Ptolemaic Alexandria, where Egyptian, Greek, Roman, and now Etruscan cultures intersected in ways we're still discovering. This wasn't just casual contact, but deep cultural integration, where sacred texts from one civilization could become burial goods for another. Recent technological advances have allowed researchers to examine the mummy without unwrapping her, revealing new details about both Nessie Hensu and her unusual wrappings. CT scans show that she was a well-nourished woman in her 30s or 40s, likely from Egypt's middle class. The careful mummification suggests her family had resources to afford quality burial preparation. The Etruscan text itself remains partially mysterious. While scholars can translate portions dealing with religious festivals and deity names, much of the language remains undeciphered. This makes the Zagreb mummy not just an archaeological curiosity, but an active research tool for understanding Etruscan civilization. Today, Nessie Hensu rests in Zagreb's Archaeological Museum, her unusual wrappings still yielding new insights into ancient world connections. She represents something remarkable: physical evidence that ancient peoples were far more interconnected than we previously imagined, their sacred traditions flowing across cultures in ways that created entirely new forms of religious expression. Her story continues to challenge our understanding of how ancient civilizations interacted, traded, and shared their most precious beliefs across the vast expanse of the Mediterranean world. The unknown queen of the pyramids. Imagine walking through the shadow of ancient pyramids when your shovel strikes something that shouldn't exist. A burial chamber for someone completely erased from history. This moment arrived for Czech archaeologist Miroslav Barta on January 4th, 2015, in the desert sands of Abusir, 20 kilometers south of Cairo. What his team uncovered that day was a tomb that challenged our understanding of Egypt's 5th dynasty royal family tree. The discovery began innocently enough. Barta's team had been working for decades in Abusir, a lesser-known pyramid field that served as a royal cemetery during Egypt's golden age of pyramid building. Unlike the famous monuments at Giza, Abusir's pyramids belong to the 5th dynasty pharaohs, rulers from around 2500 to 2400 BCE, who built smaller but equally ambitious burial complexes. For years, archaeologists had mapped the known rulers buried here: Pharaoh Sahura, Pharaoh Nefertiti, and the tragically short-lived Pharaoh Nefertiti, who died young before his pyramid could be completed. The historical records seemed complete. Royal wives and mothers had been identified, their burial places accounted for, but the desert was about to reveal that someone had been forgotten entirely. The 5th dynasty represented a crucial period in Egyptian history. Following the massive pyramid projects of the 4th dynasty, Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure at Giza, these rulers scaled back their monuments but maintained elaborate burial traditions. They built pyramid complexes with temples, causeways, and smaller pyramids for their queens. The archaeological records suggested historians knew all the major players from this period. This confidence began to crack when Barta's team found carved limestone blocks near Nefertiti's unfinished pyramid. The blocks formed part of a small mastaba tomb, a rectangular burial structure typical of high-ranking officials. But as excavation continued, hieroglyphic inscriptions on the tomb walls revealed something extraordinary. This wasn't the burial place of a court official, but of a queen whose name appeared nowhere in historical records. The inscriptions clearly identified the tomb's occupant as king's wife and mother of the king, titles reserved for Egypt's most powerful royal women. More specifically, the hieroglyphs spelled out her name, Kentakawes III. The numbering system used by Egyptologists indicated that 2 previous queens named Kentakawes were already known to history. This was a 3rd queen with the same name who had somehow vanished from all recorded sources. But who was she? The tomb's location provided the first crucial clue. Its proximity to Nefertiti's pyramid complex suggested she was his wife. But this presented an immediate puzzle. Historical sources from the period made no mention of Nefertiti having a queen. The young pharaoh was thought to have died before marrying or producing heirs, his pyramid left unfinished as testament to his abbreviated reign. The excavation team began searching for additional evidence. Inside Kentakawes III's burial chamber, they found the typical grave goods of a royal woman: 27 pottery vessels, copper tools, and fragments of limestone vessels inscribed with her name and titles. The quality and quantity of these artifacts confirmed her high status, but they raised new questions about the 5th dynasty royal succession. Carbon dating placed the tomb's construction firmly in the mid-25th century BCE, exactly when Nefertiti ruled. Architectural analysis showed the tomb was built using the same construction techniques and materials as other royal burials from the period. Everything pointed to Khentakaus III being a legitimate queen from this dynasty, yet she had been completely absent from historical consciousness. Modern research efforts have tried to piece together her story using archaeological evidence and comparative analysis with other 5th dynasty queens. Computer modelling of the Abusir royal cemetery has revealed that her tomb was strategically positioned within the royal necropolis, not marginalised or hidden. This suggests she held genuine power and respect during her lifetime. Some Egyptologists now theorise that Khentakaus III might have served as a regent after Nefertiti's early death, ruling on behalf of a young heir who didn't survive to adulthood. This would explain her powerful titles while accounting for why later historical records, compiled centuries after her death, might have overlooked her brief regency. Other researchers suggest she could have been a secondary wife whose existence was deliberately obscured by political rivals after Nefertiti's death. Royal succession in the 5th dynasty was often contested, with competing branches of the royal family vying for power. A queen whose children failed to claim the throne might have been systematically erased from official records. The ongoing investigation has revealed that Khentakaus III's tomb was robbed in antiquity, probably during the chaotic First Intermediate period, when royal tombs were systematically plundered. This ancient robbery destroyed many artifacts that might have provided clearer answers about her identity and role in the dynasty. Today, new technologies are being applied to extract more information from her burial site. Ground-penetrating radar has detected additional chambers that might contain more artifacts or inscriptions. Digital photography and enhanced imaging techniques continue to reveal faded hieroglyphs that might hold clues to her identity. The search for Khentakaus III's place in history represents more than academic curiosity. Her discovery has forced Egyptologists to reconsider how much of ancient Egypt's royal history remains unknown. If a queen could be entirely forgotten despite having an elaborate tomb in a major royal cemetery, how many other royal figures have vanished from historical memory? The mystery deepens with each season of excavation at Abusir as archaeologists continue finding evidence of complex political relationships and succession disputes that never made it into the official historical record. Khentakaus III stands as a powerful reminder that even in death, the ancient Egyptian royal family continues to guard its secrets. The destroyed 4th pyramid. Stand at the edge of Abu Rawash today and you'll see what looks like a massive construction site abandoned mid-project. Scattered limestone blocks, a gaping pit where a burial chamber once lay, and rubble that stretches across the desert plateau. Yet according to ancient Egyptian records, this desolate wasteland was once home to one of the most beautiful pyramids ever built, a monument that should have taken its place among the wonders at nearby Giza. The chronological puzzle begins with Pharaoh Djedefre, who ruled Egypt sometime between 2566 and 2558 BCE, though even these dates remain hotly debated. Ancient sources place him as Khufu's son and immediate successor, making him the rightful heir to Egypt's greatest pyramid builder. Logic suggests he would have built his eternal resting place at Giza, continuing the family tradition. Instead, Djedefre chose Abu Rawash, 8 kilometers north of his father's Great Pyramid, breaking a pattern that had defined 4th dynasty royal burials. This decision has created a timeline mystery that Egyptologists have struggled to resolve for over a century. If Djedefre was indeed Khufu's chosen successor, why did he abandon Giza? If he ruled for the 8 years that some sources claim, why does his pyramid appear unfinished? And if it was never completed, how do we explain ancient descriptions of its former glory? The historical trail leading to this mystery begins with the 4th dynasty's royal succession crisis. While most sources name Djedefre as Khufu's heir, some inscriptions suggest a power struggle between competing branches of the royal family. Djedefre's decision to build at Abu Rawash might have been a political statement, establishing his own royal necropolis separate from potential rivals who remained loyal to the Giza site. archaeological evidence from the 1990s French excavations revealed that Djedefre's pyramid was architecturally revolutionary. Unlike his predecessors, who placed burial chambers within the pyramid structure, Djedefre carved his chambers deep into the bedrock beneath his monument. This innovation would later influence 5th dynasty pyramid design, suggesting his reign had lasting impact despite its apparent brevity. But here's where the timeline becomes truly puzzling. Carbon dating of organic materials found at Abu Rawash suggests construction continued for at least a decade, far longer than Djedefre's supposed 8-year reign. Either the dating methods are flawed, the historical chronology is wrong, or Djedefre ruled much longer than ancient sources indicate. Each possibility challenges fundamental assumptions about 4th dynasty history. Modern search efforts began in earnest during Napoleon's 1798 Egyptian campaign, when French scholars first documented the ruined state of Abu Rawash. They found a pyramid reduced to its lowest courses, with massive stone blocks scattered across the surrounding desert. Early excavators assumed they were looking at an unfinished monument, abandoned when Djedefre died young. This assumption seemed to fit the historical narrative perfectly. Ancient sources describe Djedefre as a controversial ruler who moved Egypt's capital and changed religious practices. His early death would explain both the pyramid's incomplete state and his successor Khafre's decision to return to Giza for his own monument. However, the 1990s excavations by Michel Valoggia's team revealed evidence that challenged this comfortable explanation. They found fragments of a granite pyramidion, the pyramid's capstone, suggesting the monument had been completed. They also discovered remains of a causeway connecting the pyramid to a valley temple, along with foundations of smaller pyramids for Djedefre's queens. This was not an abandoned project, but a functioning royal necropolis. The discovery of these pyramid complex elements created a new mystery. If Djedefre's pyramid was completed, what happened to it? The answer appears to lie in the Roman period, when Abu Rawash was systematically quarried for building stone. Roman-era construction projects in nearby Memphis and later Islamic Cairo required massive amounts of high-quality limestone, and the isolated location of Djedefre's pyramid made it an ideal source. But this explanation creates its own chronological puzzles. Roman quarrying typically targeted easily accessible stone, not the precisely fitted blocks of pyramid construction. The systematic destruction of Abu Rawash suggests a deliberate demolition project that lasted centuries. Why would Roman engineers invest such effort in destroying a single pyramid when plenty of accessible stone was available elsewhere? Some researchers now propose that the destruction began much earlier, possibly during the first intermediate period, when royal monuments were systematically vandalized by competing dynasties. Others suggest that Akhenaten's religious revolution targeted Abu Rawash, specifically because Djedefre had promoted the cult of Ra, making his pyramid a symbol of the old religious order. Recent satellite imaging and ground-penetrating radar surveys have revealed that much more of the Abu Rawash complex survives than previously thought. Underground chambers, intact sections of the causeway, and buried satellite pyramids remain hidden beneath centuries of accumulated sand and debris. These discoveries suggest that a significant portion of Djedefre's architectural achievement still awaits excavation. The ongoing quest to understand Abu Rawash has been hampered by its location in a military zone, limiting archaeological access for decades. Recent political changes have begun opening new opportunities for research, but much of the site remains off-limits to systematic investigation. Digital reconstruction projects using the discovered architectural fragments have attempted to visualize how Djedefre's pyramid might have appeared when complete. These models suggest it would have stood approximately 67 meters tall, making it comparable to the Pyramid of Menkaure at Giza. Its elevated position on the Abu Rawash plateau would have made it visible from across the Nile Valley, a commanding presence that announced Djedefre's royal power. The mystery of Abu Rawash continues to evolve as new dating methods and archaeological techniques reveal previously hidden aspects of the site. Each discovery adds new pieces to the chronological puzzle while raising fresh questions about 4th dynasty politics, royal succession, and the ultimate fate of Egypt's lost 4th pyramid. Today, Abu Rawash stands as a testament to how much of ancient Egypt's architectural heritage has been lost to time, politics, and human intervention. leaving archaeologists to piece together fragments of a vanished glory. The Dendera light conspiracy. Step into any internet forum discussing ancient mysteries, and you'll quickly encounter one of modern archaeology's most persistent controversies. Type ancient Egyptian electricity into a search engine, and thousands of pages will argue that our ancestors possessed technological knowledge we're only rediscovering today. At the centre of this debate sits a carved relief in southern Egypt that has sparked decades of heated discussion between mainstream scholars and alternative historians. The Temple of Hathor at Dendera, built during Egypt's Ptolemaic period around 50 BCE, contains wall carvings that some claim depict electric light bulbs thousands of years before Edison's invention. These aren't subtle hieroglyphs requiring expert interpretation. The reliefs show unmistakable bulb-shaped objects with serpentine filaments inside, connected to what appears to be cables and supported by pillar-like structures that proponents argue resemble modern electrical equipment. According to mainstream Egyptology, these carvings represent traditional religious symbols. The bulb shapes are lotus flowers, sacred in Egyptian mythology and associated with creation and rebirth. The serpent inside represents Harsamtus, a form of the god Horus, emerging from the lotus at dawn. The supporting pillars are Djed symbols, representing stability and endurance. The connecting elements are simply decorative borders linking the religious imagery together. But alternative researchers point to striking visual similarities between these ancient carvings and modern electrical devices. The proportions match contemporary light bulbs. The serpentine forms inside resemble glowing filaments. The supporting structures look remarkably like electrical insulators. Most compelling to believers is the absence of soot in many Egyptian tombs and temples, despite the intricate paintings covering walls and ceilings that would have required extensive illumination to create. This lighting paradox has puzzled researchers for generations. How did ancient Egyptian artists paint detailed murals in pitch-black underground chambers without leaving traces of torch smoke or oil lamp residue? Some tomb paintings are so intricate and precise that they seem impossible to execute by flickering firelight. The colours remain vibrant after millennia, showing no damage from the heavy smoke that torches or oil lamps would have produced. Supporters of the ancient electricity theory argue this evidence points to a lost technology. They suggest the Dendera reliefs are technical diagrams preserved by priests who understood principles we're only now rediscovering. Some propose that ancient Egyptians used primitive batteries, pointing to mysterious objects found in Baghdad that some interpret as electrical cells dating to 250 BCE. The engineering analysis becomes even more intriguing when examining the precision required for pyramid construction and the sophisticated understanding of mathematics, astronomy, and physics evident throughout Egyptian monuments. If ancient Egyptians could calculate pi to multiple decimal places and align massive structures to celestial bodies with incredible accuracy, proponents argue, why couldn't they have discovered electrical principles? However, conventional archaeologists offer practical explanations for the lighting mystery. Well-designed oil lamps using clean-burning olive oil or animal fat produce minimal soot, especially with proper ventilation systems. Polished bronze mirrors could have directed sunlight deep into tomb passages during construction. The paintings might have been completed in sections near tomb entrances where natural light was available, then sealed as work progressed inward. Recent experiments have demonstrated that efficient oil lamps, combined with reflective surfaces and careful ventilation, can provide adequate lighting for detailed artwork while producing virtually no soot buildup. Modern recreations of ancient Egyptian lamps show they burned surprisingly cleanly when properly maintained and fueled with refined oils. The symbolic interpretation also carries weight when examined within Egyptian religious context. Lotus flowers appearing in tomb art consistently represent rebirth and the journey from death to afterlife. Serpents emerging from flowers symbolize the sun god's daily resurrection at dawn. These weren't random decorative choices, but carefully planned religious messages designed to guide the deceased through their eternal journey. Yet questions remain that fuel ongoing debate. Why do the Dendera reliefs look so remarkably similar to modern electrical equipment if they're purely symbolic? How did ancient artists achieve such precision in underground chambers with primitive lighting? Why did some Egyptian temples show evidence of advanced metallurgy and chemical knowledge that seems beyond their supposed technological capabilities? Modern technology has allowed researchers to analyse Egyptian sites with unprecedented detail. Ground-penetrating radar, advanced chemical analysis, and 3D imaging reveal new mysteries while solving old ones. Some findings support conventional interpretations, while others raise fresh questions about ancient Egyptian capabilities. The debate reflects a broader tension between accepting established historical narratives and remaining open to alternative possibilities. Whether the Dendera reliefs represent forgotten technology or sophisticated religious symbolism, they demonstrate that ancient civilizations possessed knowledge and capabilities that continue to surprise us. The mystery endures because both explanations, ancient electricity and symbolic art, require us to reconsider our assumptions about what our ancestors knew and how they applied that knowledge to create monuments that still inspire wonder today. The lost labyrinth of Hara. Picture a building so vast that it outshines the pyramids themselves, containing 3,000 rooms filled with hieroglyphs and murals that tell the complete story of ancient Egypt. Now imagine that this architectural marvel has somehow vanished entirely, leaving behind only tantalizing descriptions and a barren stretch of desert sand. This is the fate of the legendary labyrinth of Hara, a structure so magnificent that ancient historians called it greater than all Greek monuments combined. The mystery begins with the writings of Herodotus, the Greek historian who visited Egypt around 450 BCE. He described the labyrinth as a wonder beyond description, built near the pyramid of Pharaoh Amenemhat III in the Fayum region, about 60 miles southeast of Cairo. According to his account, the structure contained exactly 3,000 rooms arranged across 2 levels, 1,500 above ground and 1,500 below. The underground chambers were forbidden to visitors, but Herodotus was allowed to explore the upper level, where he found himself lost among endless corridors connecting room after room of carved reliefs and painted murals. Herodotus wasn't alone in his amazement. The Roman geographer Strabo visited the site 3 centuries later and confirmed the labyrinth's existence, describing it as a complex so intricate that a visitor needed a guide to avoid becoming hopelessly lost. Pliny the Elder also wrote about the structure, noting that it had been built to serve as both a palace and a tomb for the 12 districts of Egypt, with each section dedicated to a different nome or administrative region. The labyrinth was built during Egypt's Middle Kingdom, around 1850 BCE, as part of Pharaoh Amenemhat III's massive construction project at Hara. This pharaoh, who ruled for nearly 50 years, was the last great king of the 12th dynasty and oversaw a period of prosperity and architectural ambition. His pyramid at Hara was innovative in design, built with a mud brick core and limestone casing, but it was the enormous mortuary temple complex attached to it that earned the name Labyrinth from impressed Greek visitors. The structure served multiple purposes in ancient Egyptian religion and politics. As a mortuary temple, it provided a place for priests to perform daily rituals to ensure Amenemhat III's successful journey through the afterlife. But historians believe it also functioned as an administrative centre, where representatives from Egypt's 42 nomes could gather for important ceremonies and meetings. The complex layout with sections dedicated to different regions supported this governmental function. For over 1,500 years, the labyrinth stood as one of Egypt's most impressive monuments. Ancient sources suggest it remained largely intact through the Ptolemaic period, when Greek rulers controlled Egypt and continued to maintain many pharaonic traditions. But somewhere during the Roman occupation, the great structure began to disappear. Stone by stone, the labyrinth was dismantled and its materials carried away for use in other construction projects. The first modern attempt to locate the lost labyrinth came in 1888, when British archaeologist Flinders Petrie excavated the area around Amenemhat III's pyramid. Petrie was a meticulous excavator who revolutionized archaeological methods in Egypt, but even his careful techniques couldn't fully reveal what had happened to the missing structure. He found massive stone foundations and evidence of rooms extending far beneath the sand, but the superstructure had vanished so completely that he could only guess at its original extent. Petrie's excavations revealed tantalizing clues about the labyrinth's construction. He uncovered granite columns, limestone blocks with carved hieroglyphs, and foundation walls that suggested a complex extending over several acres. The quality of workmanship matched other royal monuments from the Middle Kingdom, confirming that this had been no ordinary building. But the systematic removal of stone blocks made it impossible to reconstruct the original floor plan or understand how the famous 3,000 rooms had been arranged. Modern technology has brought new tools to the search for Hawara's lost labyrinth. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted in the 1990s and 2000s revealed extensive underground structures still hidden beneath the desert floor. These high-tech investigations detected regular patterns of walls and chambers extending far beyond the area excavated by Petrie, suggesting that much of the original complex remains buried and potentially intact. In 2008, a Belgian-Egyptian team used the most advanced ground-penetrating radar available to map the subsurface around Hawara Pyramid. Their results were stunning. The technology revealed a vast underground complex with the same dimensions described by ancient historians. The radar images showed regular geometric patterns consistent with rooms and corridors, arranged in the systematic layout that would be expected from a major royal mortuary complex. More recently, satellite-based ground-penetrating radar has been applied to the Hawara site, revealing what researchers describe as an enormous underground structure that could represent the below-ground portion of the ancient labyrinth. These space-based surveys can penetrate much deeper than traditional ground-based radar, potentially revealing chambers and passages that have remained hidden for thousands of years. The modern search faces significant challenges beyond just technology. The area around Hawara has been extensively cultivated for agriculture, with irrigation channels and modern buildings covering much of the ancient site. Local water tables have risen since ancient times, potentially flooding lower chambers that were originally dry. Political instability in Egypt has also limited access for international research teams during crucial periods. Current investigations continue to produce intriguing results without providing definitive answers. Magnetometry surveys have detected organized patterns of stone and brick structures beneath the surface. Chemical analysis of soil samples has revealed traces of organic materials and metal objects that suggest human activity across a much larger area than previously suspected. But actual excavation of these underground features remains limited by practical and financial constraints. The quest to rediscover Hawara's labyrinth represents more than academic curiosity about a lost monument. If the ancient descriptions are accurate, the complex would contain some of the most extensive hieroglyphic inscriptions ever created, potentially preserving detailed records of Middle Kingdom history, religion, and administration that exist nowhere else. The 3,000 rooms described by Herodotus could hold libraries of information about ancient Egyptian civilization at its height. Recent developments in non-invasive archaeology offer hope for finally solving the mystery without destroying the site through extensive excavation. Advanced imaging techniques, improved ground-penetrating radar, and even cosmic ray detection systems are being developed that could map underground structures in unprecedented detail. These methods could potentially create complete three-dimensional models of the buried labyrinth without disturbing a single stone. The search continues today, with new surveys planned and improved technology being tested at the site. Each season brings the possibility that the legendary 3,000 rooms will finally be mapped and explored, revealing whether the ancient historians were accurate in their amazing descriptions, or whether the labyrinth of Hawara will remain forever one of archaeology's greatest unsolved mysteries. The Baghdad battery connection. Imagine digging through ancient ruins and finding what looks like a simple clay jar, only to discover it contains components that seem designed to generate electricity, 2,000 years before Alessandro Volta invented the first battery. This isn't science fiction. It happened in 1938 near Baghdad, when German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig uncovered artifacts that would challenge everything we thought we knew about ancient technological capabilities. Koenig was excavating at Kujut Rabu, a Parthian site southeast of Baghdad, when his team unearthed several unusual clay vessels. Each jar stood about 6 inches tall and contained a copper cylinder that encased an iron rod. The entire assembly was sealed with bitumen, a natural asphalt that prevented the metal components from touching each other. To Koenig's trained eye, these weren't random objects thrown together. They looked deliberately engineered. What made these artifacts extraordinary wasn't just their construction, but what happened when Koenig tested them. When filled with an acidic solution like vinegar or citric acid, the jars produced a measurable electrical current. The copper and iron acted as electrodes, the acidic liquid served as an electrolyte, and the bitumen provided insulation. In other words, these two 000-year-old clay pots functioned as primitive batteries, capable of generating about 1.1 to 2 volts of electricity. The discovery sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. According to conventional history, humans didn't harness electricity until the 18th century, yet here was physical evidence suggesting ancient Mesopotamians had created working galvanic cells during the Parthian Empire, sometime between 250 BCE and 250 CE. The implications were staggering. If ancient peoples could generate electricity, what else might they have achieved that we've lost to history? Koenig proposed that these batteries were used for electroplating, coating base metals with precious metals like gold or silver. This theory gained support when he observed local craftsmen in 1930s Baghdad using similar primitive electrical setups for gold plating. Perhaps, he suggested, this ancient technique had been passed down through generations of metalworkers, preserving knowledge from the Parthian period. Modern reproductions of the Baghdad battery have confirmed its electrical capabilities. Researchers have built working models using the same materials and design, achieving voltage outputs similar to what Koenig observed. When connected in series, multiple batteries can generate even higher voltages, potentially enough for practical applications like electroplating small objects or providing mild electrical stimulation. But electroplating wasn't the only possible use. Some researchers suggest the batteries might have served medical purposes. Ancient texts from various civilizations describe using electric fish like torpedo rays to treat pain and paralysis. Perhaps the Baghdad batteries provided a more controlled form of electrical therapy, allowing physicians to deliver precise doses of current to patients without relying on dangerous live fish. Another intriguing possibility involves lighting. Some researchers have speculated that arrays of these batteries could have powered primitive light sources, perhaps explaining mysterious ancient references to eternal flames that burned without visible fuel. However, this remains highly speculative, as no corresponding lighting devices have been discovered. The mystery deepens when we consider the archaeological context. The batteries weren't found in isolation but alongside typical household items from the Parthian period: pottery, tools, and decorative objects. This suggests they weren't rare, specialized devices but potentially common items used in daily life. Yet no ancient texts describe their construction or use, leaving us to guess at their purpose. Critics of the battery theory point out several problems with the electrical interpretation. The bitumen seals show no evidence of the corrosion that would result from regular electrical use. No copper or silver objects from the same period show signs of electroplating. Most importantly, no connecting wires or other electrical equipment have been found alongside the batteries. Some archaeologists propose alternative explanations. The jars might have been used for storing sacred scrolls, with the metal components serving as protective elements to prevent deterioration. Others suggest they were ritual objects, their unusual construction holding religious rather than practical significance. The copper and iron combination appears in various ancient symbolic contexts, representing the union of different metals or elements. Recent scientific analysis has added new layers to the mystery. Chemical examination of residues inside the jars has revealed traces of organic acids, supporting the theory that they once contained acidic solutions. However, the specific acids found don't match what would be expected from grape juice or vinegar, suggesting the ancient users might have employed different electrolytes than modern experimenters. The current archaeological evidence presents us with a technological paradox. We have artifacts that demonstrably function as batteries, created by civilization that left no other evidence of understanding electricity. Either the Parthians independently discovered electrochemical principles that wouldn't be rediscovered in Europe for 17 centuries, or these objects served entirely different purposes that happen to mimic electrical devices. What makes this mystery particularly frustrating is how much we still don't know about Parthian technology and science. The Parthian Empire controlled crucial trade routes between East and West, facilitating exchange of knowledge as well as goods. They were accomplished engineers who built sophisticated irrigation systems and impressive architectural works. Perhaps electrical devices weren't beyond their capabilities after all. The Baghdad batteries remain one of archaeology's most intriguing puzzles. Whether they represent lost ancient technology or misinterpreted ritual objects, they force us to question our assumptions about what past civilizations could achieve. Sometimes, the most interesting discoveries are those that resist easy explanation, reminding us that the ancient world still holds secrets we're only beginning to understand. The predynastic civilization gap. Pick up any textbook on ancient Egypt and you'll find a timeline that seems perfectly straightforward. The predynastic period runs from roughly 6000 to 3100 BCE, divided into neat phases called Badarian, Amratian, and Ghazean cultures. These dates appear solid, scientific, backed by over a century of archaeological work. But look closer at how these numbers were calculated, and you'll discover one of Egyptology's most enduring chronological puzzles, built on assumptions that may be fundamentally flawed. The problem began in 1899 when Flinders Petrie, excavating cemeteries near the village of Saqqara, faced a challenge that would shape Egyptian prehistory forever. Unlike later Egyptian sites with clear stratigraphy and historical records, these predynastic burial grounds offered no obvious way to determine which graves were older or younger. Petrie's solution was brilliant but problematic. He invented sequence dating, arranging pottery styles in what seemed like a logical evolutionary progression from simple to complex. Working with thousands of pottery vessels, Petrie assigned numerical values from 30 to 80, creating a relative timeline based purely on stylistic changes. He assumed that simpler pottery was older and more elaborate designs were younger, following Victorian ideas about cultural evolution. This system became the backbone of predynastic chronology, with sequence dates 30, 40 representing the Amratian period, 40, 60 covering the Ghazean, and 60, 80 marking the transition to dynastic Egypt. But Petrie's sequence dating contained a hidden flaw that wouldn't become apparent for decades. His system was entirely relative. It could tell you that one pot style came before another, but it couldn't provide actual calendar dates. When radiocarbon dating arrived in the 1950s, Egyptologists simply attached carbon-14 dates to Petrie's sequence, assuming his stylistic progression accurately reflected the passage of time. The first carbon-14 dates from predynastic sites seem to confirm Petrie's timeline. Badarian sites yielded dates around 4500 BCE, Amratian contexts dated to 4000, 3500 BCE, and Ghazean materials fell between 3500, 3100 BCE. For decades, these numbers appeared to validate the sequence dating system, creating confidence in a chronology that stretched predynastic Egypt across nearly 3 millennia. However, as more radiocarbon dates accumulated throughout the 1980s and 1990s, disturbing patterns began to emerge. Supposedly early Badarian sites sometimes produced dates that overlapped with later periods. Ghazean pottery appeared in contexts that carbon dating suggested were much older than expected. Most troubling, some sites seem to show cultural regression, with simpler pottery styles appearing after more complex ones. The chronological confusion deepened when researchers realized that Petrie's original sequence dating was based on incomplete data. He had worked primarily with intact pottery vessels from wealthy burials, ignoring the broken sherds that represented everyday pottery use. When archaeologists began studying these overlooked fragments, they found that many supposedly distinct pottery styles actually coexisted, suggesting that Petrie's neat evolutionary sequence was largely artificial. Modern reanalysis of predynastic radiocarbon dates has revealed systematic problems with the traditional chronology. Many early dates came from sites with poor stratigraphic control, making it unclear which cultural materials were actually associated with which carbon samples. Other dates were obtained from wood charcoal, which could represent old wood burned centuries after the tree died, producing artificially ancient dates. The dating controversy intensified in the 2000s when high-precision AMS radiocarbon dating was applied to carefully selected samples from key predynastic sites. These new dates suggested that the entire predynastic period might have been much shorter than previously thought, perhaps lasting only 1,500 years instead of 3,000. If correct, this would compress the development of Egyptian civilization into an impossibly brief time span, forcing scholars to completely reconsider how complex societies emerge. Some researchers now argue that the traditional predynastic phases, Badarian, Amratian, and Gerzean may not represent chronological periods at all, but rather regional variations or social distinctions within contemporary communities. Under this interpretation, pottery styles that Petrie arranged in temporal sequence actually reflect geographical differences or status markers used by different groups living at the same time. The implications of these chronological uncertainties extend far beyond academic debates. If the predynastic period was shorter than believed, then Egyptian civilization developed much more rapidly than current models suggest. If the traditional phases represent regional rather than temporal differences, then our understanding of how Egyptian culture spread and unified needs complete revision. Recent attempts to resolve these dating controversies have focused on obtaining radiocarbon dates from short-lived organic materials found in direct association with diagnostic pottery styles. However, many predynastic sites are located in areas where organic preservation is poor, limiting the availability of suitable samples for precise dating. The chronological problems are compounded by the fact that predynastic Egypt spans the crucial transition from Neolithic to Bronze Age technology, a period when dating methods face inherent limitations. Radiocarbon dating becomes less precise for this time period due to fluctuations in atmospheric carbon-14 levels, creating date ranges that often span several centuries. International dating projects have attempted to correlate Egyptian predynastic sites with better dated contemporaneous cultures in the Levant and Mesopotamia, but these efforts have produced contradictory results. Some connections suggest that certain predynastic phases were contemporary with specific Near Eastern periods, while other evidence points to significantly different dates. The ongoing chronological uncertainty has profound implications for understanding the origins of Egyptian civilization. Without reliable absolute dates, it remains unclear whether Egyptian cultural developments preceded, followed, or occurred simultaneously with similar changes in neighbouring regions. This temporal ambiguity affects theories about cultural diffusion, independent invention, and the pace of social change in the ancient world. Today, the predynastic chronology gap represents one of archaeology's most persistent puzzles, where over a century of research has created as many questions as answers about when and how Egyptian civilization truly began. The Sphinx clause of Tel Hazor. For generations, textbooks taught us a simple truth about ancient Egypt's reach. Pharaohs built their monuments along the Nile, traded cautiously with neighbours, and kept their most sacred royal symbols close to home. The mighty Sphinx, that fusion of human wisdom and lion strength, belonged to Egypt's desert sands. When archaeologists excavated ancient cities across the Middle East, they expected to find local pottery, Canaanite temples, and evidence of regional trade. They didn't expect to find pieces of Pharaoh himself. In 2013, a volunteer at Tel Hazor in northern Israel made an extraordinary discovery while carefully brushing dirt from what seemed like another ordinary stone fragment. The piece she uncovered wasn't just any carved rock. It was the front paws of a sphinx, complete with a hieroglyphic inscription nestled between them. As the dirt cleared away, ancient Egyptian symbols emerged, spelling out a name that sent shockwaves through the archaeological community: Menkaure, the pyramid-building pharaoh who ruled Egypt over 4,000 years ago. The discovery challenged everything we thought we knew about Egyptian foreign policy in the Old Kingdom. Menkaure wasn't just any pharaoh. He was the builder of the smallest of Giza's 3 great pyramids, a ruler from Egypt's 4th dynasty around 2500 BCE. His reign represented the height of Egyptian power, when pharaohs commanded vast resources and controlled trade routes across the known world. Yet here was his royal Sphinx, not in some Egyptian temple but buried in the ruins of Hazor, a Canaanite city hundreds of miles from the Nile. The fragment itself told a remarkable story. Only the Sphinx's front paws and base survived, carved from hard Egyptian stone with the kind of precision that marked royal workshops. The hieroglyphic inscription between the paws followed traditional Egyptian format, declaring Menkaure's divine kingship in the sacred language of the pharaohs. This wasn't some local imitation or decorative piece inspired by Egyptian art. It was an authentic royal monument crafted in Egypt for an Egyptian king. But how did it end up in Hazor? The city itself provided crucial clues. During the Bronze Age, Hazor was the largest urban centre in Canaan, covering nearly 200 acres and housing perhaps 20,000 people. Ancient texts described it as the head of all the kingdoms in the region, a powerful city-state that controlled crucial trade routes between Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Anatolia. Archaeological evidence revealed a sophisticated culture with monumental architecture, advanced metalworking, and connections stretching across the ancient world. Initial theories suggested the Sphinx might have arrived as war booty. Perhaps Egyptian armies had campaigned in Canaan and local rulers had captured royal monuments as trophies. But the historical record showed no evidence of major Egyptian military expeditions to Hazor during Menkaura's reign. The Old Kingdom pharaohs were builders and traders, not conquerors of distant lands. A more intriguing possibility emerged from understanding ancient diplomatic practices. Royal gifts were a cornerstone of international relations in the Bronze Age. Pharaohs sent precious objects to foreign rulers to cement alliances, ensure safe passage for merchants, and demonstrate Egypt's wealth and power. Could Menkaure have sent this Sphinx as a diplomatic gift to Hazor's king? The idea gained support from other discoveries at the site. Excavators found Egyptian artifacts dating to different periods, suggesting long-term contact between Hazor and the Nile kingdoms. Fragments of Egyptian pottery, scarabs bearing royal names, and even pieces of Egyptian statuary painted a picture of sustained diplomatic and commercial relationships stretching across centuries. Recent analysis revealed even more surprising details about how the Sphinx arrived in Hazor. The statue had been deliberately broken in antiquity, but not through warfare or accident. The fracture patterns suggested careful dismantling, possibly to transport the heavy monument across hundreds of miles of desert and mountain terrain. This kind of systematic disassembly required planning and resources, the work of organised diplomatic missions rather than random raiders. The discovery also shed new light on Canaan's role in the ancient world system. Rather than peripheral kingdoms receiving occasional Egyptian attention, cities like Hazor appeared to be key partners in a complex network of alliances and trade relationships. The Sphinx represented not just diplomatic contact, but meaningful political recognition. Menkaure saw Hazor's ruler as worthy of receiving royal Egyptian monuments. Archaeological work at other Canaanite sites began revealing similar patterns. Egyptian royal objects appeared at Megiddo, Giza, and other major cities, suggesting a systematic policy of diplomatic gift-giving that historians had never recognized. The Sphinx claws of Hazor weren't an isolated anomaly, but part of a broader strategy of Egyptian soft power projection across the ancient Middle East. The implications extended far beyond ancient history. The Hazor Sphinx demonstrated that even 4,500 years ago, powerful kingdoms understood the importance of cultural diplomacy and international relationships. Menkaure's gift to Hazor represented sophisticated statecraft, using sacred symbols to build political alliances across cultural and geographical boundaries. Today, those sphinx paws rest in Jerusalem's Israel Museum, the hieroglyphic inscriptions still clearly visible after millennia. They serve as tangible proof that the ancient world was far more interconnected than we previously understood, where royal monuments could travel hundreds of miles to cement friendships between kingdoms separated by desert and sea. The Abydos helicopter hieroglyphs. When French archaeologist Auguste Mariette first cleared the sand from the Temple of Seti-Vs at Abydos in 1863, he documented thousands of hieroglyphic inscriptions without realizing he'd uncovered what would become one of the most controversial archaeological finds in Egypt. For over a century, the carvings lay quietly among the temple's sacred walls, their strange shapes hidden among traditional Egyptian symbols. It wasn't until modern photography brought these images to worldwide attention that people began asking an impossible question. How did ancient Egyptians carve what appears to be a helicopter, a submarine, and other modern aircraft into stone 3,000 years before these machines existed? The temple itself represents one of ancient Egypt's most magnificent achievements. Built during the 19th dynasty around 1290 BCE, it served as Seti-Furnt's memorial to the gods and his own divine kingship. The precision of its construction rivals any ancient building. Massive limestone blocks fitted together with mathematical accuracy, corridors aligned to celestial events, and hieroglyphic inscriptions carved with microscopic detail that modern stonemasons struggle to replicate. But on one particular lintel in the temple's hypostyle hall, something extraordinary appears to challenge everything we know about ancient Egyptian capabilities. Carved into the stone are unmistakable shapes. What looks like a modern helicopter with rotor blades, a submarine-like vessel, and what appears to be a jet aircraft or glider. The images are so precise, so detailed, that they seem to show mechanical components, landing skids, cockpit windows, even what appears to be missile or torpedo shapes. The discovery gained worldwide attention in the 1990s when clear photographs began circulating, sparking immediate controversy. How could ancient Egyptians, working with copper tools and basic technology, create images of machines that wouldn't be invented for thousands of years? The implications seemed staggering. Either these carvings represented some form of ancient advanced technology, time travel, or contact with beings possessing knowledge far beyond what we believe possible for that era. Initial investigations by enthusiasts and alternative historians proposed several extraordinary theories. Some suggested the Egyptians had actually developed advanced flying machines, pointing to other ancient texts that mentioned flying boats of the gods and similar references. Others proposed that these images represented visits from time travelers or extraterrestrial beings who had shared advanced technology with ancient civilizations. The engineering evidence seemed compelling at first glance. The carvings showed remarkable detail. The helicopter image included what appeared to be rotor blade attachments, a tail boom, and even landing gear. The submarine shape featured what looked like a conning tower and propulsion system. These weren't vague shapes that required imagination to interpret. They were precise technical drawings that looked like they belonged in a modern aircraft manual. But as Egyptologists began examining the carvings more closely, a different picture emerged. The investigation revealed something that fundamentally changed the entire mystery. These weren't single carvings at all, but what archaeologists call a palimpsest relief. The stone had been carved twice, with two completely different sets of hieroglyphs layered on top of each other. The original inscription had been carved during Seti I's reign, containing his royal titles and standard pharaonic declarations, he who repulses the 9 enemies of Egypt, and similar royal boasts. When his son Ramesses II came to power, he ordered workers to plaster over his father's cartouches and recarve the stone with his own royal names and titles. This practice was common in ancient Egypt, where pharaohs regularly appropriated their predecessors' monuments. Over the centuries, the plaster layer gradually eroded, exposing portions of both inscriptions simultaneously. Where Seti I's hieroglyphs showed through Ramesses II's overlay, the combined shapes created entirely new images that bore no resemblance to either original inscription. The helicopter emerged where Seti's reed symbols intersected with Ramesses' bird hieroglyphs. The submarine appeared where different royal cartouches overlapped at specific angles. Detailed analysis revealed the carving techniques used, traditional Egyptian methods employing copper chisels, wooden mallets, and abrasive sand. There was no evidence of advanced cutting tools or techniques beyond what archaeologists knew ancient Egyptians possessed. The limestone showed typical tool marks from the period, and the hieroglyphic styles matched exactly what scholars expected from the 19th dynasty. Yet questions remain that continue to puzzle researchers. The precision required to create such detailed overlapping inscriptions suggests Egyptian stoneworkers possessed remarkable skills in planning and execution. The mathematical accuracy needed to align multiple layers of text while maintaining readable hieroglyphs in both layers demonstrates engineering capabilities that some scholars argue we still underestimate. The palimpsest also reveals something unexpected about ancient Egyptian record-keeping and royal propaganda. The fact that Ramesses II felt compelled to erase his father's name suggests complex political dynamics we're still deciphering. Why plaster over inscriptions rather than simply adding new ones? What motivated such systematic recarving throughout the temple? Modern scanning technology has revealed additional layers beneath the visible carvings, suggesting the temple walls might contain even more overlapping inscriptions from different periods. Each layer represents different pharaohs, different political messages, different religious emphases, a kind of ancient palimpsest containing thousands of years of Egyptian history compressed into single stone surfaces. The helicopter hieroglyphs continue to attract visitors from around the world, many still convinced they're viewing evidence of ancient advanced technology. Tour guides regularly field questions about time travel and ancient aliens, while archaeologists patiently explain the palimpsest process. The carvings have become a powerful example of how modern interpretation can create mysteries from perfectly explicable ancient practices. Recent discoveries of similar palimpsest reliefs throughout Egypt suggest this recarving practice was more common than previously understood. Temples at Karnak, Luxor, and other sites show evidence of multiple inscription layers, though none create shapes quite as striking as the Abydos images. Each discovery adds to our understanding of how ancient Egyptian monuments evolved over time, accumulated layers of history like geological strata. Today, the helicopter hieroglyphs serve as a fascinating lesson in archaeological interpretation and the power of modern assumptions to shape ancient mysteries. The Bent Pyramid Anomaly. Drive south from Cairo for 40 kilometers and you'll encounter one of ancient Egypt's most baffling monuments, a pyramid that appears to have changed its mind halfway through construction. The Bent Pyramid at Dashur rises from the desert floor at a steep 54-degree angle, but suddenly at 154 feet high, it inexplicably shifts to a gentler 43-degree slope. This dramatic change in angle creates a bizarre kinked profile that looks like an architectural mistake. Yet radiocarbon dating reveals timing inconsistencies that challenge our understanding of when this monument was actually built. The chronological puzzle begins with Pharaoh Sneferu, traditionally dated to around 2600 to 2590 BCE, during the 4th dynasty's early period. Historical records suggest he reigned for 24 years, enough time to complete multiple pyramid projects. Yet radiocarbon dating of organic materials from the Bent Pyramid consistently produces dates that are 400 years older than expected, placing construction somewhere between 2800 to 2900 BCE. These results would push Sneferu's reign back into the 3rd dynasty, completely restructuring our understanding of early pyramid development. The discrepancy becomes even more problematic when compared to other 4th dynasty monuments. While historical chronologies place the Bent Pyramid before Sneferu's later Red Pyramid at the same site, carbon dating suggests they were built centuries apart. Some samples from the Bent Pyramid predate the entire 4th dynasty by several hundred years, while others align perfectly with traditional dating. This scatter of results has created a temporal mystery that archaeologists have struggled to resolve for decades. The engineering evidence reveals why this timing matters so much. The Bent Pyramid represents a technological leap that seems impossible for its supposed era. The monument contains 2 completely separate internal chamber systems, an unprecedented feature in pyramid construction. The lower chamber, accessed through the pyramid's base, contains a corbelled ceiling that rises 57 feet high. The upper chamber, reached through a separate entrance on the pyramid's north face, features an even more sophisticated corbelled vault. What makes this engineering truly extraordinary is the precision required to plan both chamber systems simultaneously. The architects had to calculate the exact placement of passages, chambers, and stress-relieving elements before laying a single stone. Modern structural analysis shows that the pyramid's internal architecture required advanced understanding of load distribution, material stress, and geometric principles that supposedly took centuries to develop. The technology paradox deepens when you examine the pyramid's most mysterious feature, a series of cedar beams embedded within the upper chamber's masonry. These massive wooden supports were not added after construction but were integrated into the stonework as the pyramid rose. Each beam had to be precisely positioned to carry specific structural loads, suggesting the builders possessed detailed knowledge of stress engineering that shouldn't have existed in 2600 BCE. Recent photogrammetric surveys have revealed that these cedar beams form part of an integrated support system that extends throughout the pyramid's core. The beams align with mathematical precision, creating a 3-dimensional framework that distributes the monument's enormous weight across multiple stress points. This level of engineering sophistication typically requires computer modelling to achieve, yet it was accomplished with Bronze Age tools and techniques. The angle change itself presents another technological mystery. Structural analysis shows that switching from 54 degrees to 43 degrees mid-construction required recalculating the entire pyramid's internal geometry. Every passage, chamber, and support element had to be repositioned to accommodate the new angle. The precision of this mid-course correction suggests the builders possessed advanced mathematical knowledge and surveying capabilities that leave no archaeological trace. Modern attempts to explain the angle change have produced competing theories, each raising new chronological questions. The traditional explanation suggests structural instability forced the change, Cracks appeared in the lower courses, prompting engineers to reduce the angle for safety. However, detailed examination shows no evidence of the catastrophic cracking that would justify such drastic action. Alternative theories propose that the angle change was planned from the beginning, representing a deliberate architectural experiment. This explanation requires even more advanced engineering knowledge, as the builders would have needed to calculate stress loads and material requirements for both angles before construction began. The mathematical complexity of such planning pushes back the development of sophisticated engineering knowledge by centuries. The technological requirements become even more puzzling when considering the pyramid's construction sequence. Archaeological evidence suggests the entire monument was built in a single continuous campaign, with no breaks in construction activity. The workforce had to switch from one complex internal arrangement to another without losing momentum or precision. This level of organizational sophistication indicates a highly developed construction industry that supposedly didn't exist until much later in Egyptian history. Recent discoveries have added new layers to the mystery. Ground-penetrating radar has detected what appears to be a third chamber system, previously unknown and inaccessible. This chamber lies between the two documented systems and shows signs of sophisticated internal architecture. If confirmed, it would represent a triple-chamber pyramid, a technological achievement that predates similar innovations by over 1,000 years. The dating controversy continues to generate conflicting evidence. While some radiocarbon samples support traditional chronology, others consistently produce older dates that cannot be explained by contamination or methodology errors. Independent laboratories have confirmed the results, yet they remain incompatible with accepted historical timelines. The Bent Pyramid stands today as a technological anomaly that defies both chronological and engineering explanation, challenging fundamental assumptions about ancient Egyptian capabilities and the development of pyramid construction techniques. Each new discovery adds complexity to questions that may never find satisfactory answers. The Pharaoh's Curse reality. At 3:20 in the morning on April 5th, 1923, Lord Carnarvon lay dying in a Cairo hotel room. The wealthy British aristocrat who had financed the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb just months before was now fighting blood poisoning from an infected mosquito bite. As his fever spiked and his breathing grew shallow, something strange supposedly happened. Every light in Cairo went out simultaneously. At that exact moment, back in England, his beloved dog let out a howling cry and dropped dead. Or so the newspapers reported. Within hours of Carnarvon's death, journalists worldwide were spinning tales of ancient vengeance and supernatural retribution. The Times of London ran headlines about the curse of the pharaohs striking down those who dared disturb the boy king's eternal rest. But was there any truth to these sensational claims, or was something far more ordinary, and perhaps more sinister, at work? The curse story had everything the public craved in 1923. Ancient mysteries, forbidden tombs, sudden deaths, and supernatural revenge all wrapped into one irresistible narrative. But when you start examining the actual evidence, the first cracks in the curse theory become obvious. Howard Carter, the archaeologist who physically broke into the tomb and handled more artifacts than anyone else, lived for another 64 years after the discovery. If anyone should have been cursed, shouldn't it have been him? Then there's the matter of Lord Carnarvon's death itself. The official medical records tell a much less mysterious story than the newspapers. Carnarvon had been in poor health for years, suffering from lung problems since a car accident in 1903. In March 1923, he suffered a mosquito bite on his cheek. While shaving, he accidentally cut the bite open, creating a wound that became infected. In the days before antibiotics, blood poisoning from infected cuts was a common and often fatal condition, especially for someone with Carnarvon's weakened immune system. But here's where the investigation takes an interesting turn. Modern scientists have discovered that ancient Egyptian tombs really can be deadly, just not in the way the curse believers imagined. When researchers began studying the air quality inside sealed tombs, they found something alarming. Many contained dangerous levels of toxic fungi, particularly Aspergillus flavus, which can cause severe respiratory infections and even death in people with compromised immune systems. These fungi had been growing undisturbed in the tombs for thousands of years, feeding on organic materials like wood, paper, and even the linen wrappings of mummies. When Carter's team broke the seals on Tutankhamun's tomb, They released clouds of ancient spores into the air. Anyone breathing these spores, especially someone like Carnarvon with existing lung problems, could develop serious respiratory illness. The evidence gets more compelling when you look at other deaths attributed to the curse. Several people connected to the excavation died of pneumonia or lung-related illnesses in the years following the tomb's opening. Richard Bethel, Carter's personal secretary, died suddenly in 1929 from what doctors called circulatory failure. His father, Lord Westbury, committed suicide 6 months later, supposedly distraught over his son's cursed death. But Bethel had spent countless hours inside the tomb breathing the contaminated air. Modern air quality tests have revealed just how dangerous these ancient environments can be. Researchers wearing protective gear have measured toxic fungal concentrations in Egyptian tombs that are thousands of times higher than safe levels. Some tombs also contain dangerous bacteria that have been dormant for millennia but become active when exposed to fresh air and human body heat. Yet the statistical evidence tells a different story about the curse's supposed power. In 2002, researchers published a study in the British Medical Journal examining the fate of everyone present when Tutankhamun's tomb was opened. They identified 44 people who were there for the discovery and tracked their lifespans. The results were surprising. Those exposed to the curse actually lived slightly longer on average than the control group, with a mean age at death of 70 years compared to 75 for those not present. Only 6 of the 26 people present at the tomb's opening died within the first decade. Howard Carter lived until 1939, dying at age 64 from natural causes. Harry Burton, the expedition photographer who spent more time in the tomb than almost anyone, lived to age 60. Dr. Douglas Derry, who performed the autopsy on Tutankhamun's mummy, lived to 87. The curse narrative gained power not from facts but from timing and media sensationalism. The discovery happened during the golden age of newspapers, when circulation wars drove editors to pursue the most dramatic stories possible. The mysterious East, ancient curses and sudden deaths made perfect front-page material. Each subsequent death connected even remotely to the expedition was attributed to supernatural revenge, regardless of the actual medical cause. Arthur Conan Doyle, creator of Sherlock Holmes, publicly endorsed the curse theory, lending it literary credibility. Newspapers began keeping running tallies of curse victims, often including people who had only the most tenuous connections to the tomb. When a radiologist who x-rayed the mummy died 3 years later, it was blamed on the curse. When a visitor to the tomb died in a car accident months afterward, that too was added to the list. The power of suggestion proved remarkably strong. Some people connected to the excavation became genuinely terrified of supernatural retribution, potentially affecting their health through stress and anxiety. Others began interpreting every minor illness or accident as evidence of the curse at work, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of doom. Recent investigations have revealed another possible explanation for some curse-related deaths. Ancient Egyptian tombs often contain elevated levels of radon gas, a naturally occurring radioactive element that seeps from underground rock formations. Prolonged exposure to high radon concentrations can increase cancer risk and suppress immune function, potentially explaining some of the respiratory illnesses that plagued excavation team members. The curse of the pharaohs persists in popular culture precisely because it offers a more compelling narrative than mundane explanations like fungal infections or statistical coincidence. But the real story of Tutankhamun's tomb reveals something far more interesting than supernatural vengeance. It shows how ancient environments can harbour genuine biological hazards that modern science is only beginning to understand. The unfinished obelisk's secret. Imagine walking into a granite quarry where time stopped 3,500 years ago. In the ancient stone quarries of Aswan, Egypt, workers simply vanished one day, leaving behind their tools and an enormous granite monument half-carved from the living bedrock. This is no ordinary construction site. It holds what would have been the largest obelisk ever created, a towering monument that challenges everything we think we know about ancient Egyptian technology. The unfinished obelisk lies there still, a massive granite needle measuring 41 meters long and weighing an estimated 1,200 tons. If completed and erected, it would have stood taller than a 10-story building and weighed more than 200 African elephants. To put that in perspective, This single stone would have been heavier than the largest blocks in the Great Pyramid. Yet ancient Egyptian workers were attempting to carve it, move it, and somehow lift it into position, using what we assume were simple tools and primitive methods. The monument was likely commissioned by Queen Hatshepsut around 1500 BCE, intended to match or exceed the grandest obelisks already standing in Egyptian temples. But something went wrong during the quarrying process. A massive crack appeared in the granite, running deep through what would have been the obelisk's base. Rather than attempt repairs, the workers abandoned the project entirely, leaving behind one of archaeology's most puzzling monuments. What makes this site extraordinary are the tool marks preserved in the granite. The entire quarry is covered with what archaeologists call scoop marks, curved depressions gouged directly into the solid stone that surrounds the obelisk. These marks form perfectly consistent patterns across hundreds of square meters of granite surface. Each scoop is remarkably uniform in size and depth, creating channels that outline where the obelisk was being separated from the bedrock. The official explanation points to dolerite pounding stones, hard, baseball-sized rocks that workers supposedly used to hammer away the granite. Thousands of these dolerite stones have been found scattered around the quarry. The theory suggests that teams of workers knelt around the obelisk, pounding away with these stones day after day, gradually wearing channels into the granite through sheer persistence and muscle power. Experimental archaeologists have tested this pounding technique on small granite samples. The results show that dolerite stones can indeed chip away granite, but the process is incredibly slow and labour-intensive. Researchers estimate that removing just 1 cubic metre of granite would require several workers pounding continuously for weeks. For the unfinished obelisk, workers would have needed to remove approximately 400 cubic metres of granite to free the monument from the surrounding bedrock. The mathematics become staggering when you calculate the human effort required. If the dolerite pounding theory is correct, the project would have required hundreds of workers labouring for several years just to quarry the obelisk. Each worker would have gone through dozens of pounding stones as they wore down from constant use. The physical toll on the workers would have been enormous, with repetitive stress injuries and joint damage inevitable from the constant pounding motion. Yet the scoop marks tell a different story. When you examine them closely, they show a level of precision and consistency that seems impossible to achieve with handheld pounding stones. The curves are mathematically perfect, the depths are uniform, and the spacing follows exact patterns. Some scoops cut so cleanly through the granite that they look almost machined. The edges are sharp and well-defined, without the irregular chipping you would expect from stone-on-stone pounding. Even more puzzling is the absence of the granite that was removed. The quarrying process should have created thousands of tons of granite chips and debris. While some broken dolerite stones remain scattered around the site, the granite waste is largely missing. Where did all that stone go? Some researchers suggest it was hauled away and used for other construction projects, but that would have required another massive logistical effort that left no clear archaeological trace. Recent studies using ground-penetrating radar and 3D scanning have revealed additional mysteries in the quarry. The channels around the obelisk extend deeper into the bedrock than previously thought, and their profiles show remarkable consistency throughout their depth. Some sections of the quarry display evidence of heat treatment, areas where the granite appears to have been exposed to high temperatures that made it more brittle and easier to remove. The heat treatment evidence has sparked new theories about ancient Egyptian stoneworking technology. Some researchers suggest that workers might have used controlled fires to heat sections of granite, then rapidly cooled them with water to create thermal shock fractures. This technique would have made the stone much easier to remove, but it requires sophisticated understanding of thermal expansion and material properties. Alternative theories have emerged to explain the precision of the scoop marks. Some engineers propose that the ancient Egyptians possessed more advanced stone-cutting technology than we currently recognize. The uniform curved channels might have been created by some form of guided cutting tool, possibly involving abrasives or even primitive mechanical devices that have not survived in the archaeological record. The transportation puzzle adds another layer to the mystery. Even if the ancient Egyptians could quarry a 200-ton obelisk, how would they have moved it? The quarry sits more than a kilometre from the Nile River, across uneven terrain that includes solid granite outcroppings. No ramps, roadways or transport infrastructure from the period have been identified that could have handled such massive weights. Modern engineering analysis suggests that moving the unfinished obelisk would have required innovations in logistics and mechanical engineering that supposedly didn't exist in the ancient world. The monument would have needed specially constructed roadways, massive transport sleds, and coordinated teams of thousands of workers using sophisticated rope and pulley systems. Yet no evidence of such infrastructure has been found in the area. The precision required to carve and position such monuments challenges our assumptions about ancient capabilities. The completed obelisks that do exist in Egypt were carved with hieroglyphic inscriptions that run perfectly straight for dozens of meters, with individual characters carved to uniform depths and spacing. This level of precision suggests measurement and cutting techniques that rival modern standards. The unfinished obelisk continues to generate debate about the true extent of ancient Egyptian technological capabilities. The scoop marks, the missing granite debris, the evidence of heat treatment, and the sheer scale of the project all point toward engineering knowledge that doesn't fit comfortably within our understanding of Bronze Age technology. Whether this represents lost techniques, undiscovered tools, or simply underestimated human ingenuity remains one of archaeology's most intriguing questions. The lost tomb of Cleopatra VII. In the heat of a Cairo morning on August 12th, 30 BCE, Roman soldiers carried out the last burial in Egypt's royal cemetery. They laid to rest Mark Antony first, then Cleopatra VII, the woman who had been pharaoh, goddess, and the most powerful person in the Mediterranean world. Roman historian Dio Cassius recorded that Octavian himself ordered their bodies to be properly embalmed and buried together, honouring an enemy he had respected even in defeat. Then, as quickly as the ceremony ended, all trace of their tomb vanished from history. For over 2,000 years, the location of Cleopatra's burial has remained one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. Unlike the pharaohs of the Old Kingdom, whose tombs we've found scattered across Egypt's deserts, or the New Kingdom rulers discovered in the Valley of the Kings, Cleopatra simply disappeared. No ancient tourist left directions. No medieval traveller recorded stumbling across royal tombs in Alexandria. By the time Arab historians began documenting Egypt's monuments in the Middle Ages, Cleopatra's resting place had become a legend rather than a location. The search begins with understanding what happened to ancient Alexandria itself. The city that Cleopatra ruled was a marvel of the ancient world, home to nearly 500,000 people, and the famous lighthouse that guided ships from across the Mediterranean. The royal quarter where she lived and died occupied an entire district along the eastern harbour, filled with palaces, temples, and the tombs of her Ptolemaic ancestors. Ancient sources describe this royal necropolis as one of Alexandria's most magnificent areas, where 14 generations of Greek pharaohs had been laid to rest in elaborate monuments. Then disaster struck repeatedly. Beginning in the 4th century CE, a series of catastrophic earthquakes rocked the eastern Mediterranean. The most devastating occurred in 365 CE, generating a massive tsunami that swept across Alexandria's harbour. The combination of seismic activity and rising sea levels gradually pulled entire sections of the ancient city beneath the waves. By medieval times, the royal quarter where Cleopatra had ruled lay completely underwater, its palaces and tombs hidden beneath 15 feet of murky harbour water. Modern underwater archaeology has revealed the stunning extent of this lost world. Since 1992, French marine archaeologist Franck Goddio has led expeditions mapping the submerged royal quarter. His team has discovered massive granite columns, Sphinx statues, and foundation walls that once supported Cleopatra's palace complex. They've found jewellery, coins, and everyday objects scattered across the seafloor, tangible remnants of the world's last pharaoh. But despite decades of underwater exploration, Cleopatra's tomb remains elusive. The submerged royal quarter covers several square kilometres of Mediterranean seafloor, most of it buried under centuries of accumulated silt. Ground-penetrating sonar has detected dozens of rectangular structures that could represent tomb chambers, but confirming their contents requires excavation techniques that are both expensive and technically challenging in an underwater environment. The search has expanded beyond Alexandria's harbour thanks to Dominican archaeologist Kathleen Martinez, whose theory has revolutionised the hunt for Cleopatra's tomb. Martinez argues that the queen wasn't buried in the royal quarter at all, but rather at Taposiris Magna, a temple complex 30 miles west of Alexandria. Her reasoning centers on Cleopatra's religious beliefs and her identification with the goddess Isis. Martinez's excavations at Taposiris Magna have yielded tantalizing clues. Her team has discovered coins bearing Cleopatra's image, foundation deposits suggesting royal patronage, and most recently, a 300-foot tunnel system beneath the temple complex. The tunnel, carved through solid rock, connects multiple chambers and extends toward the Mediterranean Sea. Martinez believes this elaborate underground network was designed as a burial complex for Cleopatra and Mark Antony, built according to religious principles that aligned the tomb with sacred sites dedicated to Isis and Osiris. The discoveries at Taposiris Magna have included artifacts that support the Cleopatra connection. Archaeologists have found limestone blocks inscribed with her name, bronze coins from her reign, and foundation deposits typical of Ptolemaic royal construction projects. Most intriguingly, they've uncovered a marble bust that Martinez believes depicts Cleopatra herself, though other scholars remain skeptical about the identification. Yet false leads have plagued the search since its beginning. In 2008, Zahi Hawass announced his team had found a promising burial chamber near Alexandria, only to discover it contained artifacts from a much later period. Multiple excavations in the royal quarter have uncovered impressive monuments and stunning artifacts, but none has yielded the distinctive burial goods or inscriptions that would confirm a royal Ptolemaic tomb. The challenge isn't just archaeological, but also environmental. Climate change and urban development have dramatically altered Alexandria's coastline and harbour. Rising sea levels continue to threaten underwater sites, while coastal construction projects disturb archaeological layers that have remained intact for centuries. The window for discovering Cleopatra's tomb may be narrowing as modern pressures increasingly impact ancient sites. Recent technological advances offer new hope for resolving the mystery. Satellite imaging has revealed previously unknown structures buried beneath Alexandria and surrounding areas. Advanced ground-penetrating radar can now detect chambers and tunnels at much greater depths than previous equipment allowed. Most promising, new underwater excavation robots can explore and map submerged sites with precision that would have been impossible just a decade ago. The quest for Cleopatra's tomb continues across multiple sites and research teams. Some archaeologists remain convinced she lies beneath Alexandria's harbour, waiting for underwater excavation technology to advance enough to reach her burial chamber. Others follow Martinez's lead at Taposiris Magna, believing the tunnel system will eventually yield the discovery that has eluded researchers for over a century. Still others propose entirely different locations, from the desert sites near Alexandria to temple complexes along the Nile Delta. Each season brings new expeditions, new theories, and new hopes that the last pharaoh's final resting place will finally be revealed. 23 mysteries, thousands of years of history, and we're still asking questions. Some of these puzzles may never be solved. Cleopatra's tomb might stay hidden forever. The Sphinx might keep its age secret for another century. The true builders of the pyramids may remain unknown. But that's what makes Egypt fascinating. Every discovery leads to new questions. Every answer reveals 10 more mysteries.